We'll go ahead and get started and call the November 15th, 2023 left board meeting to order. Let's go ahead and take a moment of silence to remember our fallen. All right, thank you. There's Mark. All right, looking at our agenda, it's rather full. Thanks, Steve. Just kidding.
You guys set the agenda. You have nobody to blame but yourself.
That's right. Just for the record, I know you're saying. All right. Item number 1 is the approval of our September 27th and October 25th.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the minutes as presented. Is there any discussion, comments, changes? Seeing none here, none online. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Minutes are adopted. Thank you very much. Mr. Nelson, item number 2, Secure Act 2.0 review.
As you'll recall, earlier this interim, when we were working on the interim work plan, one of the issues that was brought to the board's attention was federal law changes, which was referred to as the Secure Act 2.0. And that involved a number of different pieces. The Department of Retirement Systems is here today to give an update on that project and where things sit. And with that, I will turn it over to Sean Merchant for that presentation. Thank you, Sean. And it's to kind of let you know how things are going, the pieces that impact left, the changes and the timing, and then answer any questions that you might have.
Morning, Sean.
Morning, Mr. Chair. For the record, Sean Merchant with the Department of Retirement Systems. As always, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Steve, for giving the sort of lead in for this Federal Secure Act 2.0 and how the agency is implementing the provisions that apply to government plans, and specifically kind of the things that we think are of importance to our and your left members. So again, this is the Secure Act 2.0, follows Secure Act 1.0. After the measure was passed by the federal government, the legislature authorized funding for the implementation of the Secure Act 2.0, so we could implement the provisions of the federal appropriations bill. And what we're doing, we are implementing the following changes, kind of give you a thumbnail of what they are. Really, there are a lengthy number of provisions that were contained within the Secure Act 2.0, many of which were not relevant to either government plans or features of our plan that were either optional or didn't pertain to DRS overall. But there were some provisions that did and that do specifically kind of apply to or would affect your members. So with that, here we go. This is what we're implementing, and I'll kind of give you an update where we're at. So probably the biggest that we hear about a lot, or a thing that was always a bit of a challenge, was there was a requirement to have public safety officers have their insurance premiums deducted from the pensions in order to qualify for a $3,000 tax exclusion that was offered by the IRS. It was a challenge for us because we'd have to kind of make every health plan a vendor for our system, and then it was just administratively, it was kind of a pain. Well, they eliminated that provision in the Secure Act 2.0, so no longer do you have to have your premiums deducted from your pension in order to qualify for the tax exclusion. So that's a win for everybody. They also modified the exemption for early withdrawal, the early withdrawal penalty, and include public safety officers with at least 25 years of service credit. So that exemption gets modified. I think it's down to 10%, is what the penalty is. And with that, they expanded the definition of qualified public safety officers. Every member, just as a base. Every member of Left 2 is a qualified or was beforehand a public safety officer. They just included or added some additional employee types to the definition of qualified public safety officers. Think, for instance, a correction officer who may not be a Left 2 member, but they are in the public safety realm. So there are a few of those that were added to the definition of public safety officers, and those people now also would be included in the modified exemption for the early withdrawal penalty that I just mentioned. Another change that is probably, well, it will, hopefully affect us all, is there's a change to the required minimum distribution, or as everyone loves to call it, the RMD age for that. So they changed that. Secure Act 2.1 or 1.0 raised it a few years. Secure Act 2.0 increases it to age 73. I think it was 72 prior to that initially, and then it bumps it out a couple of years later to 75. Depending on when you retire, you would qualify for either 73 for the required minimum distribution or age 75, which we do hear from members that, what is this thing you're making me have to take money out? So raising that age will be a benefit to a lot of folks that that don't feel they want to necessarily take money out when the federal government says they are required to. We are also, as a feature of the Secure Act 2.0, eliminating the requirement for DCP, so our deferred compensation program. I bring DCP up not necessarily because you're all members, but I know there's been interest on this board about DCP and what it is, and we love to talk about DCP because, just a shameless plug, it's very low cost, well-administered plan. We're very proud of our DCP program, but it eliminates the requirement for DCP to make deferral changes on the first of the following month. And that'll be effective or starting after the 2023 tax year. And next, a feature of the Secure Act 2.0 is we recognize tribal courts as being authorized to issue quadros or qualified domestic orders. So prior to this, they weren't necessarily, and I think this kind of dovetails or is a recognition that as the tribes are now able to join Left 2 for their tribal police, well, now the federal government says, hey, they can also be authorized to issue quadros. So these implementations, these are the highlights of things that I think really are affecting potentially Left 2 members. Like I said, some of the other things were optional or features of the plan we don't have, like relating to loans, things like that. We don't do that. So we're not obviously implementing those parts of the Secure Act 2.0. We're completely underway with these changes, and we will be done by mid-2024. We also previously identified that we'd be implementing a provision of Secure Act 2.0 that would make the over 50 catch-up contributions a Roth transaction. Part of this, I think you could be either pre or post. It was a choice, but the IRS has extended the implementation timeline for that for up to 2 years. So that's, I don't think, going to be ready mid-2024 because we have a 2-year push on that. So we'll take advantage of that. And then going back to the $3,000 tax credit for the premiums that were deducted. In October, we did notify all the public safety officers or retired public safety officers who elected the tax savings program that they are no longer required to have the premiums deducted from their pensions in order to qualify for that tax deduction. So we won't be doing, after that, we won't be doing a separate letter for those customers regarding this deduction because it's no longer required. So that's where we're at with our implementation. I see a quizzical look if you have any questions.
Good. Patrick?
Or comments.
I'm sorry, Mark?
So I have a question. So with regard to the tax deduction piece for health insurance, is the department going to continue to provide that? Are they going to continue to do that?
If you wanted to have your premiums paid, I believe so. I will double check on that, Mark, and let you know.
Okay. Because it's a great program.
Well, it's sort of the set it and forget it, and once you have it done.
Yes, right. So I was just wondering if they're going to continue to do that.
I'll
Or
double
if you
check.
have to, now you're going to have to make an individual contribution or a specific contribution.
I would say we probably would not be setting up new health insurance providers, but I will get
Okay,
100% clarity on that and get back to you, Mark.
okay, yep, thank you.
Steve?
Do you happen to know whether the health premium deduction lowers their taxable income that you guys report for when you report the pension?
Looking at Seth, I'm not certain about the tax liability. I don't believe so either.
Okay, would you mind
Yep.
just, thank you, double checking on that and including that in your response?
Yep. I may have an answer for these before we're done today.
Thank you.
Sean, and where could we direct our members if they have questions regarding these changes? Is something that's on your website? I see Seth nodding.
Yeah, we
Okay.
do have it on our website. Of course, if they have trouble finding it, you can always direct them to me and I will get them to the right person or place on the website for this information as well.
For the mid-2024 implementation, we've been getting, as you mentioned, calls and contacts from members about the health insurance deduction. That's still required right now, right? You guys are still doing that part right now, or has that already been implemented? We wanted to put something in our last newsletter about it, but we weren't quite sure what to say until we had this update from you guys. We can coordinate that
Yeah,
with
Coordinate.
you as far as how you want to roll that out to the members, the implementation of that piece. But you're right, that piece has got a ton of attention from the Left 2 membership.
we'll work together on that.
Other questions? Not seeing any? Thank you. And then it looks like you're up for our next one as well in the hot seat.
It's quality time with Sean.
That's right. Quality time.
So every year, the Department of Retirement Systems provides the board with an update on the administration of benefits. As you'll recall, when the board was first created, the expectation in the initiative was that the board would take over administration of benefits, and the board decided very early on that it would be in the best interest of the members to allow administration to continue with DRS, and that DRS would provide updates to the board annually. And so this is the annual update. Sean, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Steve. Again, thank you, Chair Lawson, Sean Merchant, with Department of Retirement Systems, here to give you our annual update. Again, it's always a pleasure to do this because it's fun to kind of talk about the work that we do and the size and scale of the Department of Retirement Systems, because you kind of forget, or at least I kind of forget how big it is and what we actually do until you see numbers on paper. So with that, let's get into it. So our first piece, we'll go high level, how big it is and how big our membership is. We serve a membership, as you can see, of a little over 900,000 members. So 900, almost a million people are contained within our system, which, as a plug for the work that we're doing to upgrade our system, was built in the mid-90s. So think of a PC from the mid-90s running. We are updating that as we speak. So it is a very robust system, and unfortunately, it's basically bulletproof, but it's certainly time for that to be upgraded and enhanced. So we're working on that. So again, about almost getting close to 1 million members. Of that membership, 350,000 are active members. So these are working, they're actually contributing to all our plans. Almost 200,000 of those are vested, so they're going to get a annual benefit from us, and about 155,000 are non-vested members that are contained in our plan. So some of those people may never, and some of them may come back and end up getting a monthly pension from us, but about 155,000 are non-vested. We have about 225,000, give or take, annuitants. So these would be represented as retirees, beneficiaries, and others who are receiving monthly pension payments or payments from the department. And we have about 335,000 inactive members. So 72,000 of those, these numbers are as of June 30th of previous year. It's kind of like actuaries where it's always looking back. So it's not right now current. So these things change and increase over time. So those are inactive members who have left employment but aren't receiving any payments. And then we have 262,263 inactive members who are non-vested. So those might have a year, 2, 3, maybe 3 months of time in our system. So they've just been sitting there in the system. Some of them have been inactive, non-vested members for years, if not decades. So we keep track of them, and when they turn 70 and a half or 73, 75, whatever, you have to find them and try and get them the money that is owed to them as well, which creates certain challenges in and of itself. So let's drill in a little bit on left two, since we're here with you all at the board. Of that 900 plus thousand members, how many of them are left two members? About 18,500 left two members, and about 10,000-ish of you have retired. And the average age of left two member as of the valuation or the annual financial report is about 41.7, almost 42 years old. So it shows you the plan's maturing. Certainly it's that age has been creeping up since I was at the board. It was a much younger plan, and I remember when it was like, the first couple hundred retirees, and the average age of our retirees, because that advances, is 61.1 years old. So compared to, say, left one, the average age is like 77 for a retiree. And the average working age, there are still a few of them that are working in left one, is I think 69 plus years old that are still working in left one. So what are these 61-year-olds, what are they receiving monthly? Approximately around average, if they have full career, about $8,500 is what their pension is currently. So that gives you a sense of big picture, and then focused in on you all as a board and your members. So those 900,000 plus members all either do work or work for employers. We do partner with 1,400 plus employers. It fluctuates again over time. That's crept up from when I started there, was about 1,300. So over, I won't tell you how many years, but a few. We've gone up at least 100 plus employers that have joined our system. And that's as of June 30th, 2023. 34 of those employers are reporting only DCP, so that's all they're doing. They're not necessarily employed with reporting members into our systems. They're only reporting DCP contributions. And 1,385 employers are in DCP administered plans. So that includes state, higher ed, counties, most cities, and a lot of local jurisdictions. There's even like weed and water districts that may have 1, 2, very small number of employees, but they're in our system and they're reporting to us. So with 1 million plus members contributing and employers, 1,400 members, employers reporting to us wage and compensation and sending us money, how much are we talking about in terms of the trust for the state, was held in trust for the state? As of the June 30th of 2023, there was $189 billion held in retirement trust fund assets. Let that sink in. That's a lot of zeros. $189 billion. That all is here in the here in the investment board and invested, and they make more and more money for you. we collect about $5.5 billion annually in contributions. So that's both member and employer. That's based on compensation and excludes contributions to member optional bills and mandatory inventory invoices and DCP. So that's just basically wages. $5.5 billion comes through our door annually that we then turn over to the investment board to invest in the $189 billion trust fund and make more money. Because about 80+% of your pension dollar comes from investment earnings. It's not straight one-to-one. We pay out annually almost $8 billion in benefits and contribution refunds. So if somebody withdraws, but almost $8 billion we're paying out. That's about $500 million, give or take, a month that we're paying out. So that's a pretty significant payroll that we're running. It's, again, it kind of boggles my mind when I think about it. These are, significant and large numbers, and it is done all these pretty much without any real hiccups that we hope new members notice if anything goes wrong or anything happens, because by and large it just runs smoothly. Again, because you have an expressed interest in DCP. DCP is growing every month. When we got the auto enrollment bill passed several years ago, continues to increase membership, and with that we're up to $6.2 billion in total assets in DCP. About 132,000 total participants, and of those 132,000 total participants, 87,000 are actively contributing money to the DCP. And I mentioned auto enrollment and how that's a boon for the system. About 57,000 participants have been auto enrolled since January 2017 when the bill was effective. And of that, the people that have been auto enrolled, the retention or stick rate, that's what they use in the industry, about 88% stay. They don't opt out. Inertia is a wonderful thing when it comes to people's retirement savings. Sort of they get in and they just stay in, and they keep just chugging along, getting money into their DCP account, which is absolutely fantastic. I'd like to put this slide up. It shows the benefits that are paid by county. A lot of times legislators like to see kind of how's all this money that's you're paying out affecting my district or my area. So here that is. We could certainly share this if you don't have it with your packet, because it's kind of interesting too. And about 86% of the benefits are paid to in-state recipients. That's a question too, like, well, how many people move out of state? Is everyone going to Florida or Arizona? Nope, turns out no. Most of them, 86% of them are staying here, and we're paying money to them, and that helps our state's economy, because that's all going to be tax revenue on everything they buy. And this is from fiscal year 2023. Also, just real quick, overall, big picture, our plans, we're a 96% funded ratio overall for all plans. You guys' plan obviously is funded at I think it's 104%. That's down because of the benefit enhancement account that was passed, and the lump sum, the tiered multiplier and stuff you got. But 104% is like really good, really sound, really solvent, because of the decisions you guys have made in terms of contribution rates and rate stability. So kudos to the board for that. Let's drill in a little bit. Here's left two benefits by county. Similar slide, but this is just left two benefits by county. And of the left two benefits, 82% are paid to in-state residents. So a little bit less of you. Apparently some of you like to go chase the sun more than the overall pension system. But here's that number should you be interested in kind of taking that home with you as well. We do all of this, pay all of these benefits and administer this plan with about 250-ish people. That number hasn't really changed a whole lot over time. We did in the last legislative session get authorization to hire additional team members to bolster our efforts at member just communications and being able to serve you better in a more timely manner. They're coming online as they get trained up. This slide gives you just a peek at the workload growth over time. You can see 2023 is not, I don't think represents an entire year because it's from June 30th of 2023. So it looks like it went down, but generally numbers are always up. And anecdotally, when I started, I think we were retiring about 6,000 members a year, and now we're over 12,000 members a year that are going through the retirement process. So it's a growth industry. And again, we were doing it without a significant increase in FTEs, or Steve could probably talk about this too, like for decades. But we realize you can only do so much and ask so much of people until you literally do need. You can enhance your systems and enhance them, but eventually you need more team members, and we're asking and got more team members. With that, and the amount of money that we are processing and sending out to our members, the $500+ million a month, it's obviously a juicy target for fraudsters. And we've noticed that, paid attention to the fact that elder fraud is a big and increasing thing in the United States. We are not immune to bad actors trying to abscond with our members' money, your members' money, by assuming their identities or all kinds of things. This graph shows you how steadily those numbers are ticking up. We're paying attention to that. Like I said, we are not immune to that. Here's a graph that shows suspicious activity at retirement systems beginning in 2021 and ending in the second quarter of 2023, so June 30th, 2023. You can see it has gone up in a bit of an alarming spike. And of those, we'll go through a bit of the graph. The total events represents the total discrete events that involve unauthorized access to our member portal or creation of an account in the portal. So we are paying attention to all these. The next one, portal access, it's sort of a rusty color, represents the number of existing portal accounts that experienced some unauthorized access. And you can see there's not a ton of those numbers, but they do go up over time. The next one, account created, is sort of a gray color, and that represents the number of times customers who didn't have a portal account had an account created by an unauthorized party. So people may be mining for data for people outside our systems in order to try and create an account as if they were that person. So that's kind of what we're talking about. The next graph is, the yellow piece is the account number changed. So people that have an account, and this was somebody trying to change the account. This represents the number of times an unauthorized party successfully changed a customer's direct deposit account number. And that's scary that these people are able to get in there and try and do this stuff. And the blue, darker blue, further on the right, is an attempted theft. So that represents the total number of times the nature of the specific exploit clearly indicated an attempted theft of benefits. So it's not a huge number, but we're definitely seeing more of this. And then the last piece, green, is the actual theft. This represents the number of successful thefts. We are clearly paying attention to this, not only us, but our record keeper that manages our DCP and our plans 3 deferred comp accounts. But we're seeing that it's a growth industry, and it's alarming. I had talked to you about a bill we were considering that would have protected member data from public disclosure. Regretfully, we're not able to pursue that with legislation during this legislative session. It's requiring a little more work with some of the other interest groups to get it more palatable to them, and also still have the teeth that we would like it to have. So not to say that we're abandoning that effort. We're continuing to work that, and we will during the session and in the next interim, because it is a very near and dear to our hearts to protect our members' data. So that's a heads up that will continually be on our radar. But what we are doing is We have asked in the supplemental budget request with the governor's office for some funds and some people.
Sean, real quick.
Yep.
We had a question. Go ahead, Jay. Sorry.
Sure.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate you highlighting this on your prior slide. I'm just wondering on, the spikes in the theft activity that we're seeing in 2023. Have you guys done some root cause on some of that to understand like what's happening
We do.
this year?
Yeah, we always do. Yeah.
Can you speak to it at all?
We'll go through the scenario with not only if it's just ourselves, but we'll also do work with our record keeper to kind of see what happened and if there's changes that we need to make with our systems. And we have in fact made changes to our authorization process. Some of them probably would be perceived as cumbersome to members because it's adding additional layers or complexity to the authentication process. We also work with appropriate law enforcement. If it's determined it's an attempted or theft, we are definitely in touch with local law enforcement, but we also work with the FBI if it's over state, if somebody's trying to do it over state line or even from abroad. We have seen that bad actors can be in foreign nations. So we most definitely are looking at what happened, why, and what we can do to make our system more secure and prevent the similar type of access or attempted access from happening. And to that, the budget request we're talking about, we're asking for resources and in fact FTE's people to augment the teams that we have in place to help track down and prevent these sorts of things. So we do, like I said, we pay benefits to over 225,000 retirees and beneficiaries a month, and it's over $500 million each month. And over 250,000 active and retired members access their accounts through our portal each year. So it's people are using this, which is good because then they're paying attention, but not everybody is actively paying attention. So in fiscal year 2022, 7,700 customers submitted retirement applications and 4,800 did direct deposit account changes online. So again, it gives just a sense of the scale of the numbers of people that are using this. And of course, people expect it to be safe and secure, and because it's an online service, and also convenient. I mean, some of the convenience gets taken away with additional security, but we figure it's definitely worth it. The FBI's 2022 Elder Fraud Report states victims over the age of 60 filed a little over 88,000 complaints that resulted in $3.1 billion in losses in 2022 alone. So it's a big deal. And we've seen a variety of those very similar cases increase over the years. So we're asking for some software and people. One is the LexisNexis fraud prevention software that would help, would integrate with our existing systems. It's another layer. It gives us another tool that we can use to prevent this. And also we're asking for a person to go in our fraud prevention units. We have a risk management shop with a team that we're adding for an additional person to help with that, and also an additional FTE for our cyber group, so our IT shop to do this. So also a temporary project staff for the implementation. And we feel it's $1.25 million in 2025 and a little over $1 million in 25-27. That is super inexpensive for potential savings in terms of not just the money that potential members could lose, but also the heartbreak and just how horrific that would be if there was a big security breach. So I really expect this to be included in the governor's budget, and then we'll work to make sure that it's both in the House and the Senate's budget as well. But again, if you hear about it or whatever, we obviously would appreciate our members are saying, yes, absolutely support DRS in their budget request. So regrettably, not a bill for member data, but this is a piece that we think we can get chewed off this year. Our next,
Sean,
sure.
Another question.
Question, Sean, would it be safe to say in this day and age, cybersecurity has come to the forefront, as I'm sure you know. And in fact, there's been 2 very high profile hacks of counties and state agencies just recently in the last couple months. Would you say cybersecurity is on the forefront for
Of
DRS?
our minds?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when you talk about other agencies that have been hacked, it is in the forefront of our mind with any agency that we have data sharing arrangements with. We're very cognizant of we can do what we can with our data in our house, but we have agreements with other agencies. And so we are pushing to make sure that what they do with the data is also secure. And if they are done with it, they get rid of it and don't just sort of have it laying around as a legacy. So in addition to just focusing on our own home, we're looking where we're also, you know, with our partners, they have access to our data and what they're doing with it and how they're securing it and making sure that they are taking appropriate steps to secure that data as well.
Sure. And as somebody who's done fraud investigations in the past, especially specifically with cybersecurity and the function of my job in law enforcement, when I look at your slide there and it says adding 1 FTE, obviously I assume that there's several others. What does your staff look like when it comes to cybersecurity?
I don't know the exact number of folks that are in our IT shop with cybersecurity. We do have a CISO. We have other folks that are working on our systems. 3 or 4.
Sure.
That would have been my guess.
Okay. Because I know within the state, there's IT islands, you know, with different agencies. And so, and as you mentioned, you know, sometimes you're connected or you're sharing, you're touching somebody else, whether that's an employer or another state agency. So it's kind of hard to know that and understand that. And historically, the government, not just us in the state of Washington, but nationally, tends to fall behind on cybersecurity. And if anybody's been reading the news lately, it's the #1 issue, really. So I'm really glad you're bringing it up this morning because it is a concern. Agencies get hacked daily.
Yep.
There's attempts to hack DRS, I guarantee you, daily.
Oh, there is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to hear that. But when I look at that and I see 1 FTE, is that sufficient?
I mean, everyone would love more is always better, but
Right.
we feel that this is enough to get us what we need at this point without overreaching. Not to say that in the future this wouldn't get built out even more, but right now we feel that's what we can manage and work with. Also say when you're talking about other agencies or government that falls behind with cybersecurity, I would agree with you, although we consider ourselves a financial institution, and when our largest partnership is with a commercial or private record keeping service, so and the State Investment Board, both of those organizations pay attention to cybersecurity. I know for a fact that the record keeper does, so we're watching what they're doing and try to model some of the best practices that that industry does because they're a huge financial organization as well. So we don't just sit back and necessarily do only what the state, do this process. We look at our partners on the financial group and say, what are they doing and what could we do that's sort of the same or best practices from them as well. We try to be more forward looking than have it come down to us, I guess.
Great. All right.
But it's huge. I remember we had 77 attempts today.
Yeah.
In the past. So it's one of those things that, if you're watching it, I'm sure it's like, oh, there's one. Yeah, it's a bit scary because I don't know about you, but I have retired parents and they're not exactly the most tech savvy. And like my dad's like, oh, I clicked on this thing and, it turns out it was I'm like, oh my God. Yeah. Don't do that.
Yeah, definitely.
Jay?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am concerned by the trends of theft, particularly in this year. And so I'm wondering if we could provide a letter of support or some other mechanism to be more upfront and direct to support the supplemental budget request here.
I don't think that's going to be a problem for us to sign on. I mean, we'll be with you most of the time through the process of the legislative session. Bud's in the back, one of our legislative guys from the fire side. I know that you have, so we've got, we've got our partners here that can take care of that. It's not a problem.
And for the agency, we appreciate that. You are a very significant part of our membership, and we appreciate any support you could provide. So thank you.
Jeff's got his head down, so I wasn't gonna. Just making sure you're paying attention. Okay, I don't want to call you out, so I didn't know if I didn't want to volunteer you without making eye contact. I felt kind of bad. It's like, oh boy.
He's multitasking.
All right, Jeff, we just gave you an assignment. Thank you. Yeah,
Mark.
Go ahead, Mark.
Just a real quick question, high level question for you, because I'm probably one of those guys like your parents who, not really sure how all this works. So how would you describe the mechanism that people are using to steal money? Is it a hacking thing that comes directly to the agency, or is it also things that come to individual solicitations that come to individual members?
It could be
Say the
any number
balance.
of those. Some of them are individual solicitations to our members to try and get them to give up sensitive personal data like banking information that then they use to assume their identity. Some of them are direct attacks on our systems. So those kind of a larger, against us or individual. And there was a point at which the attacks were sort of scattered, kind of random. And then over, I think it was the summer, it became much more focused. There was a period of time in which the attempts were focused on recent retirees who had a large AFC. So they got the data like, okay, these people are recently retired, so they're probably working on accounts, whatever. They had large AFCs, so their retirement benefit's going to be a pretty good, amount monthly. Let's focus on them and try and get, information so we could basically redirect their checks to our account. And that was much more focused instead of sort of a scatter. So we realized that was a group that was doing that, and they kept trying to do it. When someone would go in and work with their account, they knew it somehow, and they would just keep pinging to try and get it. I think we have defended against that, and we've turned it over to law enforcement for if there's anything that can be done. But that's an example of the maturation of the cyber criminals looking into our systems. Some, probably not all of them, but some of them are definitely, they may be nation states. They may be just groups that happen to be offshore, or they may be groups that, are in a different state. It's the gamut,
So on the month of death, Jacob was going to talk about this, but the select committee endorsed it. We'll have it, a briefing on that topic for you at the December meeting.
Steve stepped out. Ready? Okay. So after talking about the horror of cybersecurity, let's go to another fun topic. Let's talk about death. So a bill that, looking towards the upcoming legislative session, a bill that we are working on, we put into the governor's office for authorization to run it as DRS request legislation, deals with the month of death. We talked about it briefly. I don't know if it was last meeting or the one before. But the current situation is if a member dies partway through the month, we reclaim the full benefit amount we suck it back, what I refer as claw it back. That practice has been going on forever, as far as I know, and it's made worse now that there is electronic banking. In the past, we sent checks, and you could stop that, whatever, but now it's automatic with electronic banking. So if a member dies, on day one, we go and we claw the benefit back. But I misspoke and said we prorated at that point. We actually don't. We claw the entire benefit back for that month's payment. So if they live halfway through the month, doesn't matter. We claw the whole payment back out of the account. And then there's a process by which we essentially establish sort of a new account and pay the prorated amount back into the account. So there's a period of time where, you know, anytime you had any deduction set up from your account, there's no money there. Because the state had to file the paperwork to get that prorated benefit. We think this is just horrible. It's a practice that has been going on, but it's not a good practice in our opinion. We want to change this. There are groups that do not do this. We think it's the right thing to eliminate this. You live one day, you are getting the benefit that you earn as a working employee, and that includes the final payment of the month. It's not like if you worked for an entire month, this month we're only gonna give you a portion of it, even though, because, you know, we just feel that it's wrong. So we're asking permission to run this as request legislation to make it one day in, you get the whole payment. As Steve said, the select committee heard this yesterday. They did vote the bill out, so they will be sponsoring it as select committee request legislation. We're hoping we get authorization, so it's DRS legislation as well. Asking you guys to consider it as well. It would be, in my recollection, the only time there's been 3 groups as select legislation, 3 pension groups as select or as request legislation. If we did that, so that's what we got coming on for legislative session, and I appreciate your consideration. Yep,
Sorry, yeah, Representative.
go back. Oops.
Thanks, Sean. So a couple questions on this. One, is there a requirement currently that the full benefit payment is reclaimed? I guess I don't understand.
It's just a current practice that has been.
So it doesn't have to be the practice. It doesn't sound like, even without a bill.
I do think providing legislative action would be.
It just sounds like the way you were painting it, that's part of the bill, but I think that's something that could be changed without a bill. Then the other piece I had a question around is this even if there's a spousal benefit? So
It takes, yeah, because you have to, essentially the spouse gets their account. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that would be a separate transaction. How does that work right now? So you lose your benefit and then your spouse has to reapply, or?
There's a transition process that occurs from, you know, member X's account. Then it kind of, a new account is created for the spouse to get whatever portion of the benefit they're supposed to get.
And is
starts getting
that
paid out.
required by law, or is that something that could
I
be done?
believe that it is. Oh, it's the IRS, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Other questions? Okay. Good, Daryl.
Sean, when this happens, what's generally the turnaround time between, would you know if a member dies, the turnaround time until the spouse who has the remaining benefit is then brought whole?
What I'm hearing is it's at least a couple weeks. But also keep in mind, in this period where the money is clawed back, not so much an issue for left 2 members, but a lot of other plan members have healthcare deductions taken out automatically from their account. So a lot of the other plan members in the last months of life, that's a pretty expensive time in terms of healthcare. So there's a tremendous number of bills that can pile up that wouldn't get paid. So the healthcare authority has its own process that they have to go and contact these people and, you know, work through their process. They have a group of people that do this every month. I don't want to entirely speak for HCA, but at the select committee, he said there's about people who are in this limbo status of we've got health bills and we're working with HCA to figure all this out, is about 100 people at any given day that are in this sort of limbo. It would help them out in terms of their administration. So less the people who have to do this, the cost of doing this would help them out as well if we don't do this practice anymore. They've come to testify at the select committee in favor of this. They're planning on working with the legislature as well. I didn't ask them to come today to testify before you. I can certainly have them here to talk about that process if you'd like in December.
Just to follow up, if with this legislative fix, would that also provide the, I guess, to smooth out the waters for the surviving spouse? I mean, if I die today,
I think it would make it more seamless. There wouldn't be the lag, as much of a
Right.
lag.
That's
so
what I'm
there would be
after.
something there. Yeah, and also this bill was introduced, you guys supported it in 2019. It was introduced in the 2020 legislation as well as supported by the select committee. Went through a committee hearing. That was also beginning of COVID, and it just didn't make it over the hurdles, I feel, to kind of get out of committee and to be voted on in the legislature as a whole. So labor organization that I've spoken to are all supportive of this bill and this concept. So
Wolf, I think I got your hand up.
Thank you. Appreciate the description and the interest in making this more seamless. It seems to me like there's some benefit, though, in speaking about it and communicating about it in terms of how you can make this better for people who are facing the hardest and most difficult circumstance in their life. Right. So at the moment in which all of these things are happening, for whatever reasons we have in the statute that we can control, or in our rules and our processes that we can control, here's a way that we can think about it and talk about it in terms of what it helps a human being do who's facing this circumstance, rather than having to navigate yet another complex bureaucratic thicket. Here's a way that, you know, the benefits that they're entitled to receive and continue to receive will continue to be received.
right, exactly.
Patrick.
Sean, just a little bit more Sean time. So,
Because you love it that much.
yes, I do. Well, you piqued my interest on a couple things, and Representative Berquist kind of brought it up, is that there is no, from what I heard, it's just practice. There's no law, there's no rule that says that you have to claw back. DRS doesn't have to claw this back, but they do it anyways.
I don't know the history of why it was required, but I do feel that it's our feeling that a law would, a change or a positive affirmation of this in statute would be.
I understand that, but I'm getting ready to go someplace else too. Because so if there's no rule and no law, can't DRS suspend that until we come up with a bill? Now, I understand the spouse because you got to go through IRS, but right now, if there's no bill and no law that this is just standard practice at DRS could change their practice and allow no clawback, correct?
I will have to check.
Can you check on that?
Would have done that.
Because it doesn't make sense to me if there's,
Well, there's a cost. That's right. There is a cost associated with doing this. I forgot. I get so excited about talking about how.
but let's
How much
go,
it
let's go
impacts
back
people,
to the whole thing.
But
You know where I'm going.
But there's a cost to the plan to do this.
So what is it?
The actuary provided a fiscal note back in 2020 about this, and I can't remember about 12 basis points overall to do this, because what they figure, they'll figure when you're going to die, this will benefit about half of the membership. So that's what they base their cost amount on.
So
we don't
that's-
think that we can make, as an administrative sort of just decision, something that is going to cost the plan up to 12 basis points without having some statutory guidance.
So just to, not to keep on pushing, but I'm going to push a little bit more. At
your
12
job.
basis points, that's 0.12%, right?
Mhm.
Over the overall benefit of the plan.
Right.
Comes up to like moon dust,
I would
like that.
I would agree with you.
Okay.
Our job is to
So-
administer the plan, not to make policy decisions. So
Well, isn't there a director?
right, but we are plan administrators. You guys are a governance board and look at policy issues.
Let me try this one more time.
Okay.
There's no rule, there's no law, past practice, nobody knows how it started, and nobody wants to fix it before we get a law. And nobody wants to bring it forward and say, this is what we'd like to do, and either get a head nod up and down or a head nod side to side and continue the same way. Because I think if somebody figured out when you die, you're gone.
but the people you leave behind are being adversely impacted by what the past practice that nobody understands or where it came from, but we're going to continue to do it until we get a law from the legislature to change what we know is wrong. Something like that. I'm done. You don't answer. Thanks, Sean.
I hear your comments.
Okay.
Jay?
Maybe I'm not done with this one. So I just want to support where I think Pat's going with this is it seems like if we need to circle back at some point in time with a law for clarity, I get that. But I don't understand why a change can't be made now. If we can't point to a specific law or a specific action that requires it, then it just seems it's a practice and it seems a bit arbitrary as a practice. So I just don't understand why we can't change it now. And I understand, again, wanting to come back later with a law to formalize it so that there's that absolute clarity within law, but why can't the change happen now?
I'm not entirely certain why we couldn't, but I would say that, again, as a plan administrator, we don't tend to wade into policy just sort of decisions lightly. There's been other instances where we wanted to make sure that all of the groups involved, including the legislature, who is the plan sponsor, are aware of things that we're doing that may have an impact, be it changing a rate of or a interest rate. Could the director do some of these things? Possibly, but we feel it is better to fully inform not only the labor organizations and members, but our plan sponsor of things that we have questions about or issues with, and not, I guess, yes, sort of get their blessing that that's okay to change the plan documents or add to the plan documents, which are the statutes. So our comfort level with having a statute is greater because it gives us the black and white. This is what you do on this issue, because it does. We're talking 12 basis points, maybe moon dust, but that's money.
Representative Berquist.
So it does sound though, at a minimum, the date of death, like it's the 28th of the month, you could prorate the clawback to just being the 2
That's what we do.
days.
That's what we do.
You say it's 100% clawback.
Well, what we do first is we take it all back, and then we
wait for the estate to.
and then we give them the prorated.
I don't think you have to do that though, right? You don't have to. That easily could be fixed.
I wouldn't, with our systems that were built in the 90s, I wouldn't say anything is necessarily easily fixed. Could it be changed? Possibly. I think
Okay.
Our comfort level is to just eliminate that and just you live a day, you get the full amount.
No, I got just making sure. I got Daryl, and then I've got up top. Wolf. Go ahead, Daryl.
I guess my confusion lies with if the money is paid out, then it's gone. I mean, it's budgeted to go and it's already gone. How is it when you bring it back? How is it still costing 12 basis points? I mean, it's like you're refunding a portion of that money back. If the money's gone, then without, that it seems to me like DRS could say, okay, it's already gone. It's out the door. We don't have to claw it back without, I mean, if the director can make that, if that's something as simple as it's already paid, the money has been paid out and now we're just bringing it back in. How is that still costing us, because it's refunding back, right? So we're actually bringing the money back. I don't see how they can figure out those 12 basis points.
Because we would pay the full month for everyone all the time. Currently the actuary figures about half people will live about half of them will live half the month. So we're going to get half of, let's say we have $1 million that goes out in a month. Under the bill proposal, everyone's going to get the total payout's going to be $1 million for this month. That's what it is. Today, the actuary is saying, well, half of those people actually only lived half of that month. We paid $1 million, but we're going to get back $500,000. This bill would say, I don't care how long you lived, we're paying out $1 million, and that $1 million goes out. So that's where the 12 basis point comes from, because they're like, yeah. And there's some administrative costs to doing, we have to contact people and this and that, but the big money is the cost to the system overall.
Wolf, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm hearing some ambiguity in your description about whether or not legislation is required in order to make this change. And I think there's some merit in doing the deepest dive you possibly can to determine whether the practices you adhere to now are statutorily required beyond what the IRS rules might require, which, there's snowball's chance of ever changing those. But to the extent that you don't need legislation, I'm always personally wary about seeking legislation when you don't need legislation. It's like getting more help than you need on this. If the practices can be altered, maybe by rule or by administrative procedures, I think it would be worth considering that rather than having to have statute coded in a way that reflects it. But if you find that the statute requires the current practice, you have no choice. But I'm not sure I've heard a clear description yet of where in statute this is required now. And if it's not required now, boy, I'd be sure wary about approaching the legislature for a change here.
I will get that and work with Steve so you all know that framework.
Thank you.
Just real quickly, I would support the change in the statute because that makes it clear for everybody so that the next DRS director could not come back and change this again. Who knows what they're going to do? Who knows who that person might be in the future? And I would just think that from my perspective on the board, it's a difficult thing to do to pass bills through the legislature, but I would support what you're doing now just because it takes all the ambiguity away and it makes it very clear from the future. And it would be very difficult to pass a countermanding bill to the one that you want to change things back to the way it was in terms of the next DRS director could say, no, we're not going to do this anymore for whatever reason. So I would just speak in support of what you're trying to do.
Thanks, Mark. I have a question for you. So you mentioned that SCPP endorsed this yesterday by action.
Right.
Move forward. It's going to be on our December agenda, and I imagine Jacob will probably present something. We'll have a couple different options, which is normal for us.
Yeah, we'll go over, as Sean mentioned, there was a board proposal in 2019. We'll go over that proposal, how it differs or does not differ from the current proposal, get updated numbers from the actuary's office and present you with options. We will also work with Sean and DRS, but also Jacob to get your answers to the questions about why, how this current practice came into place. Is it federal statute? Is it state statute? Is it past practice? Is it WAC? We'll have answers for those questions for you in December, if at all possible.
And then legislatively, is this going to be an agency-driven bill?
I don't know yet. The governor's office has not blessed. That happens in December, usually, when they say, yeah, go ahead and get a green sheet and do that. If we don't, we're still going to be in favor or support of any piece of legislation. Now, currently with the select committee, we're definitely going to be talking about, at a minimum, that bill in the legislative process.
Because as Steve mentioned, in 2019, we had adopted and supported a bill, correct?
Yeah, we'll go over all of that at the
Yeah.
December meeting.
Yeah.
DRS did not request the legislation in 2019. Historically, DRS doesn't request a lot of bills. Prior to this request in 2019, I think we had a bill request to protect, well, actually it was after that, but the only other bill that we've done really has been to protect members' disability application data from public disclosure. We just generally don't do a whole lot of request legislation, or historically we haven't. I mean, Steve, I don't remember when you were here how much you guys really ran either.
That actually changed when I came here. So DRS was doing agency request bill when I was the legal services manager at DRS. And then when I left to come here, that was the kind of the end of that practice. But back then, DRS was doing 2 or 3 bills maybe a year, and they tended to be more in the line of technical corrections, because DRS is the first party that is most aware of what kind of technical corrections need to be made.
And then just final one, because you mentioned the process. Has this been moved to the governor's office yet? Has it been submitted for
I
consideration?
submitted it in, I think, August.
Okay. Right. Any other questions on that subject? Let's go ahead and continue with Sean time.
Sure.
All right.
It's good. I mean, and to the board's credit, these are the type of questions that are good to ask. And as a policy board that's looking at your plan and pension policy and your plan documents, by all means, you should get answers to these questions. I apologize, I don't have answers to all of them right now, but rest assured that we will provide them to the board. So it is a testament to the work that you guys do to really look in depth at these issues, as you should. So happy to be here and do that. Want to take a little time to talk about Roth and the October rollout of the Roth, just because I know, again, not a ton of you all are in Roth with DCP, but you expressed interest in it and were really pretty instrumental in getting us the Roth implementation into our DCP program. So with that, DCP traffic has gone up since we rolled out Roth in October. So it is rolled out. It is available now. We're seeing more people taking a look at DCP month to month than we were in the past. Surprisingly, over 1,300 people attended a live or a webinar on Roth with Q&As. Like, it was amazing, the number of people that wanted to learn about it. We were surprised that we weren't sure, but we were really excited that there was that much enthusiasm out there for the Roth option in DCP. So that continues to show us this was a good thing to do. And of those, 10,000 people have watched videos that we provided on Roth and DCP. So again, it shows there was at least people want to know about it, and we're excited to provide that. So $1.2 million was converted into a Roth in October, like in the first month that it was available. So we're pretty excited about that. People are actually taking advantage of it, and people that rolled over into a Roth, $3.25 or $325,000 was rolled over into Roth. So it is a good thing that we have now in our plan, and people are taking advantage. So there's already 2,000 participants, and it's growing, that are doing Roth in DCP now. So it was a good thing to do. So, sure.
Just a quick question.
Yep.
Because I'm not
Let's see what I
a
go
few
back.
things, but a lot of things I'm not. Can you explain to me the difference between an in-plan conversion and a rollover?
Rollover would be from an out of money that was not in, it rolled over from somewhere else. In plan would be within DCP.
Okay.
So moving on, we talked about our systems that were built in the mid-90s. Super sturdy, but they are aging, and it's time to update them. We have embarked on a plan to do those. It's called CORE. It's a multi-step process to upgrade our systems from the member system that holds all your data, all your compensation, all of the stuff about you. Also, there's client service management. That's another piece. There's our financial piece that pays the checks out. So there's multiple pieces of this. We're working on the member portion now, we have found a vendor. We've signed with a vendor that's going to help us do this. It's a multi-year process. We do have funding in the budget to do this. We have continued funding in the budget to do this. But I just want to say we are in process. We're also excited that the vendor we found actually does this with pension systems. They have experience with other states modernizing pension systems. Sometimes it's difficult to find vendors. They may have financial system experience, but they don't necessarily have pension plan experience. And we're working with a company called Sagitech that actually was created by pension nerds. So they are familiar with what pensions are and how they work. And we've signed a contract with them. We are down the road with them, and things are going well. And we're excited that they actually speak our language and understand what we're saying. So just a heads up that this is going to be we'll continually come back to what we're doing on this, and we're making the system better. And ultimately it's going to give you better service and also maintain and enhance security of your data and information.
I was just going to mention that, Sean, is one of the project features, and we just had that whole presentation on cybersecurity. I would hope that what they're focused on is, that authentication feature, where it limits who can get in, those kind of things. I mean, I think that's probably one of the areas we need to focus on as well.
Oh, absolutely. But also it's reimagining how we do business. You don't want to just, well, this is how everything works today. Let's just redo that in a new system. It's actually taking the time to look at all of our processes and decide, okay, do we need to do it? Do we need to do it this way? Modernizing is not just the nuts and bolts. It's, let's really look at our business processes, make them more efficient, more secure, all of that soup to nuts.
What kind of member input are you going to have on this? I mean, if we're talking about members accessing it and being a participant,
I'm not really able to speak entirely on the project because we're literally just sort of starting that part of it. We're obviously going to be here to talk to you. I don't know if we're going to do focus groups necessarily or not, because it's really in the weeds in terms of, benefit calculations and really the nuts and bolts of the system. We're not getting to the customer service necessarily piece when you call into the office. That's another, you can find software and solutions to do that piece too. It's literally our giant database.
Right. As Mark mentioned, and I think a number of people, including myself at times, you open up a new program and you're going,
oh yeah,
what happened to it?
Yeah.
Why did they change it? And then you're looking for some feature to open some door that you can't find. And then you got to call the grandkid who's 5 and he can figure it out for you.
Right.
He can't read yet, but he can figure out how to open a door, computer program. Right. So
I had that experience last week. I was like, what happened to my heart rate and my fitness app? Apparently I don't have one anymore.
That's not a good thing.
That zero is not good.
Zero is not good.
But I'm here to talk to you, let you know, keep you informed. Any questions you have, we will continually sort of keep providing some updates to you as well. With that, do you have any questions? Really? Any
Skip that
more
slide,
questions
Sean.
about anything? Have any questions about anything?
Well, let's talk about your heart rate. Any other questions?
It's up right now.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead.
Other than Sean, just thank you. I think we put you on the hot seat a little bit today with our questions, but I just appreciate your responses. And
absolutely. And I take for granted that you get tunnel vision about the policy and you're so focused on it's the right thing to do. But the questions you have cause them to be more introspective and really go back to things that you perhaps moved beyond or whatever. So they're all good. I'll get you the information. Happy to come back anytime. I love talking to you guys. So
you're gonna have to you're gonna have to put Seth up here and just he's just back there nodding. I don't know if you're seeing me. He's not doing
He's happy he's not here.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for both being here. Mr. Nelson, item number 4.
Okay. So returning to the topic of layers of bureaucracy getting in the way of implementation of benefits, the board had heard some presentations earlier this year about the overlap between L&I determinations of a line of duty death and specifically their statute of limitations on some of those decisions and how that affects pension benefits. So as a follow-up on that topic, Jacob's here to kind of provide a comprehensive report on the status of that issue. There was remember that we got correspondence, public testimony on this issue that was also shared with the board ahead of time from Roy Orlando. With that, Jacob, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, for the record, Jacob White, staff to the board. The issue in front of you today is that there have been left Plan 2 beneficiaries who've been denied a one-time special death benefit because they missed the L&I statute of limitations for applying for those benefits. It's been a few months since I gave the initial presentation to the board, so I'm going to just go back over some of the basics before getting to some new information. So what is the special death benefit? So beneficiaries are eligible for a one-time lump sum benefit. It's currently at $287,000. There's a COLA on it, so it goes up every year, or usually. Those beneficiaries are eligible if the member died because of either a workplace injury or an occupational disease. L&I determines the beneficiary's eligibility for this benefit, and then DRS pays the benefit out of the pension fund. L&I has applied their statute of limitations to this benefit. Those statute of limitations are not just for this special death benefit. It applies to a lot of other L&I benefits as well outside of the pension system. Let's see. Yeah, that deadline, it's 1 year for a workplace injury and 2 years for occupational disease. Got some data from DRS on paying out the special death benefit. Had them go back to 2010. There were 85 applicants, 72 were approved, and 3 of those were denied for timeliness. What was interesting about that is, at least going back to 2010, no one had been denied until the last year. Wasn't able to find kind of a root cause for if that was just random or why all of a sudden this has become an issue. And then I didn't have them pull data back further than that, but I would assume that if it had occurred in the past, at least since the board was created, the board would have heard about this. Also, just wanted to draw your attention to it. When someone is denied this benefit, it doesn't just impact receiving the lump sum death benefit. It also impacts or may impact their ongoing pension benefit. So if it's a line of duty death, then they're eligible for a unreduced pension benefit. If they're a surviving spouse or, I believe, minor child. But if that's denied by L&I, then they have to choose between either taking a reduced benefit or a cash out of the. I thought Steve was going to ask something.
Well, you mentioned denied by DRS or denied by L&I. Is it a denial if it's no timeliness? Is it just no decision? They don't make a decision one way or another because it wasn't timely. And does DRS treat those as the same?
My understanding is they treat it as a denial. Yeah. Okay. And then just, so of those 3 that were denied, one of those has been reversed. But also just want to provide some data on that secondary impact of those 3 denials. So 2 of them took a return of their contributions of the members' contributions, and one of the members took a reduced pension benefit. And so I just tell you that because that's going to come back up later when we talk about the policy options. Okay, so a little more of the legislative history of this benefit. It was established in 1996. At that time, it was only for workplace injuries, not for occupational diseases. And then the board in 2006 endorsed legislation to expand it to occupational disease. And then in 2010, the board endorsed legislation that increased that benefit. It had been at the same amount, I believe, since 96, and then also instituted a COLA. And I should add that the other pensions systems also have this benefit, but they did not have that COLA and the increase in 2010. So I believe their benefit is still at 150,000. And then also just wanted to add, I think I'll touch on this again later, but by being established in 96, I believe that may have been the reason that L&I was put in charge of this instead of DRS. Is in 96, DRS was not making any disability determinations for Left 2 or any of the other pension systems. But I'll get into that a little more as we move forward. So why is there a statute of limitations? Typically for pension benefits, there is no statute of limitations. If you've earned a benefit, you need to be paid that benefit. And if you've earned a benefit and you pass away, your beneficiaries need to be paid what they are owed. So this benefit is being interpreted as being outside of that normal practice of pension benefits. So the actual RCW, the law reads that the determination of eligibility for the benefit shall be made consistent with Title 51 RCW by L&I. And so that RCW is the L&I law, just the overarching L&I law. So the law itself does not actually identify that there should be a statute of limitations applied to it. A statute of limitations yet not specifically identified at all. And so it may not have been the intent of the legislature, but that is how it's been interpreted by L&I. Like I said, this applies to other L&I benefits. And so L&I applying it to this benefit may just come from them being protective of that statute of limitations for all the other benefits they pay. But I couldn't help myself. I do want to add that when in pension law, at least, I'm not sure about L&I law, but when in pension law, when the law is ambiguous, there is case law directing that law should be interpreted in favor of the member. So something to keep in mind as we walk through this. So when I last spoke to the board, DRS was working with L&I, and DRS was hopeful, based off their initial conversations, that they may be able to resolve these 3 cases without needing legislation. And so we have an update on that. DRS has informed the board that L&I will continue to apply its statute of limitations. And there was one of the 3 was reversed. Right here, I didn't really phrase that correctly. It says L&I has reversed. It's more L&I was reversed. So it went to their Board of Industrial Appeals, and their decision was reversed. And in that case, it was a minor child of the member, and his legal guardian after his mother passed away was his grandma. And yeah, I won't get into all the facts of the case, but just a little, give you some idea of what was going on. It took L&I months to make a decision as to whether it was a occupational disease death. And after they made that decision, they did not give the minor child and the guardian a year. They started the clock for the year at the date of death. So that only gave the minor child and his grandma months to file with L&I. And so that was the reasoning, or at least my understanding of the reasoning of the Board of Industrial Appeals reversing L&I's initial decision and granting it. was that they had actually applied within a year of LNI's determination that it was a line of duty death. So LNI, in explaining their reasoning to DRS, cited a case called Cordova versus City of Seattle. This was an unpublished Court of Appeals case from, I believe, 2022. And it wasn't exactly the same set of facts as what we're talking about. It wasn't regarding the special death benefit, but they felt it was analogous to the special death benefit. And so in that case, just a little bit of the facts of it, beneficiary did apply for the duty death benefit with DRS in a timely manner. And then that when they filed with DRS, their process is to send that information over to LNI, and then LNI makes the determination for the special death benefit. And so that all went fine, except LNI said that denied the member their LNI death benefits, not the special death benefit, but the separate LNI benefits. They denied that, saying that the beneficiary had failed to notify them in a timely manner. And so the court looked at whether DRS sending that notification or sending that the person applied to DRS death benefit should be good enough for LNI to know that this person's beneficiaries were claiming that it was a duty-related death. And the court ended up holding that notice did not count, and they denied that person their LNI benefits. And so that's what LNI sent over to DRS, and then DRS shared with us. And what I found, what I thought would be of interest to the board was the dissenting opinion. And so I've got that one quote. I've got some more quotes from the dissenting judge there, but he was frustrated by this decision and wrote that widows are not supposed to have to hire lawyers in order to receive widows' benefits. And then got some more from the dissenting opinion here. The judge went on to cite that he had previously raised this issue in another decision, and he had urged that either the legislature cure the problem by statute or that the Supreme Court ride to the rescue. And then he went on to say that as with most such exhortations by intermediate appellate court judges, my jurisprudential call to arms failed to inspire legislative rescue, and the justices remain dismounted. A judge who enjoys writing. So for obvious reasons, I thought that would be of interest to the board. And then, but did want to remind you, he was not speaking directly to the special death benefit, but over his frustration over the strict application of the statute of limitations and the notification requirements that LNI was imposing. So with that, I'm going to move on to the policy options for the board today. So option one would be to shift the determination of benefit eligibility from LNI to DRS. This would mean that there is no statute of limitations because DRS does not have a statute of limitations like LNI does. And then to apply that retroactively to beneficiaries that have been denied special death benefits for not meeting the LNI statute of limitations. And so, like I said, we're aware of 3 left to beneficiaries where this has occurred. One of those appears to be resolved. The one I told you has been overturned. But I am still working with DRS to verify that secondary part of that, how that impacted the minor child. Did they get to reselect their option of taking an unreduced benefit or not? So I need to verify that. And then the second policy option would be to just explicitly state in the statute, leave the responsibility with L&I, but explicitly state that there is not a statute of limitations for this specific benefit. And then would also apply that retroactively to these beneficiaries that were denied. So try to always put some pros and cons when we go over these policy options. So for option 1, some of the pros are that similar to other pension benefits, this would remove the statute of limitations and ensure members and their beneficiaries receive the benefits they have earned. It aligns this benefit with the rest of the pension benefits administered by DRS, instead of having this one outlier that's administered by another state agency. And that it should simplify pension benefit process for beneficiaries by only needing to navigate one state agency, at least for their pension benefits. They still would need to work with L&I on other benefits, potentially. And then cons, be a relatively minor increase in cost to pay these beneficiaries. Like once again, there's 3 beneficiaries that we're aware of. So we would need to, if the board does motion to move forward on this option, we've already started working with the state actuaries to identify those costs for the board. And option 2, to have this remain with L&I, but to remove the statute of limitations. The pros of that would be that determining whether a death was duty related or not is within the existing scope of L&I's work. It is the type of work they are used to doing. The cons would be L&I would continue making a determination for a pension benefit, which is outside their typical scope of work, and they would need we would need to ensure that removing that statute of limitations did not cause any issues with other L&I laws. So next steps for the board today is you can have option 1 to motion for final briefing on policy option 1. 2 would be motion for final briefing on policy option 2. And 3 would be to take no action today. And just as a reminder, when it moves forward to final briefing, we will provide draft bill language to our partners with the state actuary and DRS, for DRS to let us know any administrative concerns, and for the state actuaries to provide some level of pricing before the December board meeting. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Questions? I have one for you.
Yeah.
So on your previous slide, pros and cons for option 2, on the pros you make mention determining whether a death was duty related or not is within the existing scope of L&I's work. So if this is transferred to DRS, is it still L&I that does it? And then it's just the decisions given to DRS for administration as far as the payouts?
So it would be up to DRS to determine that. So DRS has, since the passage of the duty-related death or duty disability benefits for Left 2 and now PSERS, they do have staff that is trained on making those determinations. So they have much more expertise than they did back in 1996 on this issue. But it would be up to them to determine whether they want to have internal staff do that, whether they want to contract it out to, they use UMass, a private contractor, to help with some of the disability determination. So they could do something like that, or they could even work with L&I to contract that out or create some sort of agreement with L&I for assistance with these decisions. And they do have a data sharing agreement with L&I also, where they have access to L&I records for members. And so if L&I has done some work on these individual cases for the L&I benefits, DRS could have access to those records to assist them with making a decision.
Is there capacity within DRS to take this on?
So that's where we would share this with. We've already been talking to them about this, so I know they're thinking about it. I'm not sure if Seth's nodding his head behind me. But yeah, so that's why we always try to share these bill drafts with them beforehand to give them an opportunity to have their fiscal note team discuss it and then hopefully be able to provide us with some information of potential cost or issues.
So back to your next steps. Yeah. So before us, we have number one is the motion for final briefing on policy option number one. Number two is motion for final briefing on policy option number two. And number three is no action at all. Entertain some direction. Jay, or sorry, Mark.
Move that we move forward on option number one.
Second.
Second. Oh.
Motion's been made and seconded for option number one. Is there comments or questions?
But just real quick, in support of, it's a pension benefit. It's not a labor and industries benefit. So I think the appropriate place to move all this is to have DRS have jurisdiction over it.
Okay. Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of option number one, say aye.
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 Against? Option number one is adopted. Thanks, Jacob. And Jacob, before you start, because I think you have another one, correct?
Yes.
Firefighter definition number 5. I've been handed a note that lunch is ready, and I've learned long ago Pat's going to get up if I don't. Go ahead and break. So let's take our 15-ish thereabouts to come back, right? Okay. All right, we'll be at recess for 15 minutes. And reconvene our meeting, and it looks like Jacob's still in the hot seat with item number 5 on our list, firefighter definition, and by background, Steve.
This issue has been before the board a couple of times already this interim. Here to provide kind of a comprehensive briefing on the topic. It is the issue for today. Jacob, I'll just leave it to you.
Let you get back to your lunch there. Okay, for the record, Jacob White, staff to the board. The issue in front of the board today, not working. There we go. Okay, so some promotional positions within a fire department may be considered PERS positions by the Department of Retirement Systems, which may limit the employer's ability to fill those positions with firefighters. So I mentioned this last time I gave an initial presentation on this, but started off with this question that I thought I understood, but is more complicated. But what is a firefighter? So whether a person qualifies as a firefighter depends on who the employer is and the nature of that position. First, they must work at a fire department, and then they must be actively employed as a full-time firefighter. And so then DRS has further defined that through rulemaking. And the definition is much longer than this, but the relevant part for this discussion is that the WAC says that they must direct or perform fire protection activities required for and directly concerned with preventing, controlling, and extinguishing fires. Do want to just say that "and" is a very important "and" as it comes up a lot, that you need to, do all three of those. And then also there's supervisory firefighters are also included and really not a part of the conversation today. And I should add that how DRS interprets that WAC. So we worked with DRS last year on possibly changing that WAC. And they came back in the end and said that it would need to be a legislative change. But how they interpret that in practice is that they look at whether in the position description or the job duties, whether that there's a requirement for that employee to potentially go out on a truck. They're really looking, are you possibly going to go out and fight fires? They don't look at whether you actually do fight fires, just whether there's that possibility. And part of that would be that would say in the job description, or there would be some sort of personnel records of the person having up-to-date training. They look for whether they've had a mask fit test, and whether they have gear. So as I mentioned, worked with the DRS on this last year, and then once they came back in the end and said it would take legislation, there was legislation last year. It was not board proposed, but that legislation sought to amend the definition of firefighter to include positions within a fire department that require an experienced firefighter. It passed through Senate Ways and Means. There was a fiscal note from OSA, and that fiscal note was indeterminate. It was unknown whether it would impact any current employees, and there was really no way. DRS did not have that data, and there was no other source, absent going out to every employer and reviewing these positions. And then there was a companion bill in the House that did not receive a hearing. And I meant to add this earlier in the presentation, but when we spoke about this last time, we talked about how part of the concern with this issue has come from the changing nature of a fire department. Started off with that initial definition of a fire department, and much like a firefighter, you have a picture of what a fire department is, but that has changed a lot over the years. And so as fire departments merge together, create regional fire authorities, there are more of these large fire employers with different positions than there have traditionally been, and there may be a desire by those fire departments to fill those positions with firefighters, people with experience in firefighting, and it may also be seen as a growth opportunity for firefighters to move up into management positions to take these positions. So I have a couple hypotheticals to go through just to illustrate this potential issue. The first one, so a fire department has full-time firefighter trainer positions. These positions do not supervise any LEF employees, and they are not required to respond to fire calls. However, they do have equipment assigned to them and are required to have an up-to-date mask fit test. My understanding based off conversations with DRS is that these positions would potentially not be eligible for LEF because there's no chance that they are going to go out and fight fires. That is not in their job description. There is not a requirement that they do that. The positions are full-time trainers. And then the second example, a management position. So a regional fire authority has a position in charge of logistics, such as purchasing firefighting equipment and supplies and supervising a group of non-LEF employees. The position requires an experienced firefighter due to their expertise of firefighting. You could imagine where it would be seen as valuable to the employer that the person making those purchases has a background in firefighting. The position is not required to respond to fire calls, and therefore the employer is not paying for them to have equipment to just set around and not be used, and not requiring them to have a up-to-date mask fit test since they do not have equipment and will not be using it. So in that one, it's more clear-cut that DRS would likely not consider that to be eligible for LEF 2. And I should add that too, it's that cost that also, because so there's clearly hoops that an employer could choose to jump through to have these positions be seen as eligible for LEF 2 by DRS. Even if there's no intent for them ever to go out on a truck, they could put that in the job description. They could pay for them to have equipment. They could pay for them to have the mask fit test. But that's one of the reasons why this is in front of the board today is should that be necessary? So So for this one, there's really just one policy option, and it's to whether the board wants to amend the definition of firefighter. That definition could be amended to include personnel serving on a full-time, fully compensated basis as an employee of a fire department in positions that necessitate firefighting experience to perform the essential functions of those positions. And then the second one would be no action. So employers would continue to be able to make those positions eligible for LEF 2 by, or lack of a better term, jumping through those hoops that I laid out before, whether they actually intend to have them fight fires or not. And then normally on these I would include pros and cons, but I think for this one it didn't really lend itself to me making a list of pros and cons. Instead, I think it really is a question for the board of should these positions be considered firefighters or not. It would potentially expand who's eligible for LEF 2, and there may be a cost with that. We've been communicating with the state actuaries on this, and they've been looking into it. And if the board does motion this option one forward today, we will provide some sort of pricing, maybe not an actual fiscal note, but a pricing of the potential cost if the actuaries see this as potentially expanding who's eligible for LEF 2. So next steps, the board can, option 1 would be to motion for a final briefing on policy option 1, or the board could take no action today. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Hey, before us, we have a proposal. Is there anyone inclined to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, make a motion for option 1.
Thank you. Motion's been made and second for option number 1.
Second.
Thank you, Tarina.
Yes.
Discussion, comments? Go ahead, brother.
Yeah. So as somebody from the outside of fire looking in from law enforcement perspective, I would just like to lend kind of some optics to this from my profession and how that transfers over to the fire folks. I would want somebody in a position, whether it's an administrator or if it's a trainer, to know what they're doing. I would want that person, just like in my profession, if I had a trainer, I would want that person to be somebody who has that experience of law enforcement, knows what I do, has been where I've been at, and is going to train myself and future people to a standard. And I would expect the same for the fire folks. And I know that they would want that too. But as somebody who benefits from fire services, as somebody who lives in my community, I would want the people governing that, individuals that are responsible for training those firefighters to be a firefighter and to know what they're doing. And I think that's not only the right thing to do, it's a fair thing to do, it's the prudent thing to do. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Other comments? Daryl?
Not knowing how this works, how do you recruit people to these positions if there's not is there a pool out there of non-firefighters that you can recruit from?
No, I think as you want to do it? Go ahead.
So right now, I would say the standard business practice is that they are all filled with firefighters, and the employers use one of the what did you call it, loopholes or
I think it's
gimmicks or whatever to satisfy DRS that the person might actually have to go out on a truck, and they go to that extra expense like of the training and the equipment in order to make sure that they're LEF eligible, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to fill the job.
Daryl, in most cases, these are people who have already worked a career through the fire service and promoted up into a role. Pat went to a logistics position after working, I think, as a captain, right? Correct. And then filled this position, and then the question all of a sudden is raised, well, are they a firefighter still? And our response is, yeah, they've never changed. You know,
Yeah.
we still can utilize their skills, their talents in some capacity, but there has been a question, so. But
Yeah. With that, can you go back one slide? I think we do. It is exactly what's going on, and sometimes you don't want to fall into those traps where all of a sudden, to save money, an employer would go, or the fire chief would say, I can save money by getting them out of left, and we'll put them into PERS to save a couple pennies here and that. And that's what you have to worry about, because as you move up through the ranks, the chance of you going out and actually fighting a fire are few and far between at a certain point, which is at the appointed positions, which is usually assistant chiefs, not battalion chiefs. Battalion chiefs are still considered that. My problem is, or concerned, from the years of my career, where it says fully compensated basis and as an employee of the fire department. One of my first places I came from, but I think Lawson was there with me at one point, is that the fire chief had the authority to decide who was going to be in those positions. And if he said or she said that they are fully compensated in a fire department but never had any type of firefighter experience, that person would be under left. Correct?
So with this language, the position description would need, or the position, not the description, the position would need to necessitate firefighting experience. So it would need to require that they have firefighting experience to be in LEF.
Okay, so as long as we clean that up, because if I got a buddy sitting out there that I want to employ as the fire chief, all I got to say is, I believe he's competent to be here, and I believe he has firing experience, so he or she gets the position. And that's the one thing I want to make sure that we tighten up on, to make sure that what we're doing is the people that have taken the either fleet through, it's fire we're talking about now, has taken their full career and they moved up through the ranks and they get into a position that at the end of their career, they're not being challenged on whether they're still under left. But also we have to be careful of somebody creating a position for their buddy to move them into a system for 5 years for 10% at a large salary, and creates a problem. So I'm into the option one, but I want to make sure that we make sure that somebody cannot use that against us down the road, because they will. There's people still out there that would do this, and I want to make sure that I don't want to have to come back later with some of these other decisions and have somebody all of a sudden that comes to hurt us, because we used to have executive directors of fire departments because they couldn't collect their left one pension if they were called fire chiefs. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
So all good intentions have bad outcomes sometimes, but this is the right thing to do, because that's what's happening now, is that people are trying to figure out how to move people away from a firefighter. I mean, every one of us that, even at a certain age, I could be 80 years old. I still think I can be a firefighter. I can't, but I'd give it the college try as they pull me out by my ankles. But it'd be a lot of fun to try. So, just saying.
Thank you for that. And I'll keep that in mind. So I'll do a bill draft and work with Steve on that. I think just first idea is to look at the definition of firefighting, so that necessitate firefighting experience, to make sure we're tight on that. So thank you.
Yeah. And Steve reminded me, this would, if we decide to take action on this, this would come back to us with a final proposal, a final briefing in December. So we have a chance to look at it a little further. Yes, Senator.
Thank you, sir. Just a couple of clarifying questions. For police, we have this equivalent in place already. They're assigned to the academy, and it's under the definition that in the military, everybody ultimately reverts to infantry. And so, well, same thing. And so if you have all hands on deck, it doesn't matter where you're working on that. Everybody gets called to arms and comes back. In the police department, so there is some sort of disequilibrium between police and fire here, law enforcement, fire. The second part is you have a definition, for example, of somebody that Geez, I lost my train of thought here. Go figure on that. Follow up when ready.
All right. Any other questions?
I think what you're trying to say is that police officers have a
Mission.
single definition of what
Commission,
that
right?
means. Right. You go to the academy or the state.
And the commission is defined.
That's the question.
Right, fire departments are different because any fire department, all fire departments have their own rules and regulations about what the training is, what the requirements are, what the testing process is to get in. So there's a lot more variability within the fire service than there is within the police business because you have to be commissioned by the state of Washington. You all have to do the same thing and know the same.
So you understood where I'm going. Thanks for jogging my memory. That's perfect. So the police department has a requirement or an expectation that you have an academy queue up, before 6 months has passed when you're on the street. Does fire have any equivalency out there that would fit this model?
Yeah, many of us have academies that require a probationary period, whatever, maybe 6 to 12 months, or maybe in some cases longer. We don't have the commission piece, which is that statewide credentialing. We've got in some instances, JATC, which is kind of an up and coming program, depending on which state you are, it's used in different capacities. But we don't have anything that would loop us together. I think there was an expansion a few years ago to have the EMT certification, because that was at some point maybe all encompassing. But as we know, as you move up in the ranks as a logistics officer or above, it's almost impossible to maintain the requirements of an EMT status. So that's why
Every employer in the fire service has their own requirements.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Well, to Pat's expectation that if there's potential for abuse, it's not a matter of if, it's when. And I get that. Do we have the ability to define specifically what fire experience would constitute a definition for this specific issue?
Yeah, we'll bring that back to you in December. I think we're clear on the concern, and so we'll be prepared to speak to how the bill language in December addresses those concerns.
Okay. So on the motion to adopt number 1, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion number 1 or item number 1 is adopted. Jacob.
Quickly, by way of introduction, and just as a reminder, because I know there's some new board members, the purpose of these introductions is to remind you how this ended up on the agenda. There was concern in the past that if a board member missed a meeting or something, all of a sudden something's on the agenda and they just wanted to know where it came from and how it ended up here. When I was not jokingly earlier saying every item was on this agenda because you put it on there, that's the truth. So this is just a kind of a reminder of how these got on there. The topic of disability conversion came up during your interim work plan. It was this is the comprehensive report on that topic, dealing with what happens when a person's disabling condition is not considered duty related at the time they retire, but is later determined to be duty related by the state. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jacob.
Okay, Steve did a good job there with the issue statements. I won't say that again. I'm going to move on to an example hypothetical to help just further explain that. And so prior to 2018, a Left 2 member could make a claim of PTSD from multiple exposures as the cause of their injury. DRS agrees the member has a disabling condition preventing them from continuing to work as a firefighter. However, the injury was not caused by a single event, and therefore the injury is not duty related, and the member is approved for non-duty instead of duty disability. After 2018, I'll get into more detail about this on the next slide, but the law changed around PTSD, and you could qualify from a single event. So should the law be changed to allow for members who retired prior to 2018 and who were approved for a non-duty disability to be eligible for duty disability in scenarios like the one above? So the legislative history on this was, you can see here where the board endorsed and created the duty disability benefit, and then the next year the catastrophic disability benefit. And then in 2018, as part of a broader law that created a presumptive disease of PTSD, also included in there was allowing for claims resulting from repeated exposure. And I should add, while I have that up there, that this is the only situation that we're aware of where the law has changed in this way, where there are left two members who may have applied and been denied for a benefit because of something not, a condition like this not being considered an occupational injury or disease, and then the law changing later to include that. And then this issue was included last session as part of a DRS ombuds bill that did not pass. So talk a bit here about presumptive occupational diseases. So a condition being identified under an L&I law as a presumptive disease makes it easier for a left member to qualify for a duty disability benefit. But that's a different issue. I don't want to confuse these two issues. That what we're talking about here is different than something being presumptive and being easier for a member to qualify under the law for. We're talking about where you were not eligible at all with that condition. So with PTSD from multiple exposure, all the doctor's notes, all the proof that that's what was going on that could not qualify you for a duty-related disability benefit. Worked with DRS to get some data on the potential scope of a change in the law like this. So there were 56 left to non-duty disability retirees prior to the effective date of the PTSD law. And then DRS was able to look at those, and based off what has been coded into their system. So their system doesn't identify super clearly like all the different medical conditions, but it did identify that there were 4 potential members who were coded into their system as either depression, anxiety, or mental condition. And so if this issue were to move forward, we'd provide that information to the state actuary to assist them with the potential pricing of this. And there's no guarantee that these 4 members would end up qualifying. Legislation would just give them the opportunity to be reconsidered to see if they would have qualified under the PTSD multiple exposure law that came after they retired. And the member would need to reapply and they could provide updated medical information of any ongoing treatment they've been receiving since then. And also, I should add the way I believe that would work would be that the member would be required to go to DRS. So DRS would not be reviewing all of the 56 or whatever potential non-duty disability retirees. That it would be the member would need to reapply with DRS. It would just create that opportunity for them. So a policy option in front of the board here is that option 1, require DRS to review non-duty disability retirements with a disabling condition that was not eligible for duty disability at time of retirement, but has since become eligible for duty disability. If the retiree's disabling condition was incurred in the line of duty, DRS must convert their retirement to duty disability. And so really there's that one option, but then I wanted to offer you a 1A and 1B. 1A would be retroactive to the effective date of the disabling condition becoming eligible. So this, in the PTSD cases, this would be back to 2018. Or option B would be prospective from the effective date of this bill forward. So no retroactive check for those members. And then option 2 would just be no action today. So next steps for the board would be a motion to receive final briefing on 1A, 1B, or no action. Would be happy to answer any questions you have on this issue.
Questions for Jacob? So I would entertain a motion. Oh, I'm sorry.
Question, sorry. Jacob, just clarification. So in consideration for 1A, retroactive to effective date of disabling condition, did you say 2018 or would it go back to?
2018. So when that condition became eligible as an occupational disease or injury.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? I entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move policy option 1A.
Is there a second?
A second.
Motion's been made and seconded for final briefing on option 1A. Discussion. Seeing none? I'm sorry, Mark. There you go. Thank you.
I'm in favor of the motion, and to me, it's a matter of equity, and it's the science of the mind moves on, and that's why these conditions were not approved in the past, but have been approved by the legislature moving forward. And I just think it would be a travesty to, well, I speak in favor of the motion because of that.
Okay.
Should apply equally to everybody. Once you see.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, 1A is adopted. Thank you, Jacob. Jacob, are you done?
I get a break.
Okay.
We're going to break it up.
All right. Looks like item number 7. It's like succession planning follow-up.
Yes, at last month's meeting, there was a discussion about succession planning, and you asked a number of questions related to your authority for hiring people and for the process for doing so, and your authority regarding setting the salaries for employees of the board. And so Karen is here today to speak to all of those questions. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Karen.
Thank you. Hopefully speak to all those questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Karen Durant, staff to the board. So our first issue that we're going to discuss, you have expressed interest in adding an additional research and policy position. By way of history, the board just adopted the biennial budget at the June meeting. Process for funding requests for new positions or other policy matters go through a budget decision package process. The deadline to submit those budget decision packages for the 2024 supplemental was September 13th. The next opportunity for decision packages will be September 2024 for the 2025 legislative session. Just for the board to remember, the last position that we received funding for was done not through a budget decision package, but through a proviso that was in the 2021-23 biennial budget. That's the basic information. These two presentations will be informational and then up for questions or discussion. Any questions? Okay. I love it. You all are lulled by your excellent lunches. That was brilliant timing. I'm just intermission for Jacob. Our next topic was on salary setting. That received quite a bit of interest at the last board meeting. The agency has 8 positions, 2 of which are exempt. and the other 6 are Washington Management Service positions. For today's presentation, we will focus on the Washington Management Service positions. Washington Management Service was created in 1993. The broadband salary structure is centralized under the authority of the Office of Financial Management. Positions are placed in bands by scoring using a matrix of accountability, decision-making, policy impact, and nature of management. Large and mid-size agencies have their own evaluation committees that review and evaluate their positions for WMS inclusion and salary banding. Because LEF is such a small agency, we rely on the Management Service Banding Committee at the Department of Enterprise Services for our evaluation and banding. All banding is subject to review and audit by OFM, State HR. Currently, this decentralization and evaluation is delegated to agencies, but it could be retracted at any time. This is the current WMS broadband salary structure effective July of this year. As mentioned earlier in this presentation, WMS was created 30 years ago. Happy birthday. The bands have received adjustments for legislatively authorized general wage increases. There have been no other market adjustments or salary studies conducted in 30 years. There are 4 broad bands and a medical band. All positions are placed in a band level, and then the agency must decide appropriate salary for position and incumbent, considering internal alignment, and within the agency, as well as positions, have a 25% increase limit within the band while they're in their current position. Agency authority. The agency has the authority within the band to adjust salaries to reflect changes in the position's responsibility, to meet documented recruitment and/or retention, resolve documented internal salary relationship issues, recognize an employee's demonstrated growth and development. WMS does not have annual progression increases like general service classified positions. Exceptions to band maximums may be approved by the Director of the Office of Financial Management. Our specific agency detail, as I mentioned earlier, we have 2 exempt positions, the Executive Director and the Executive Assistant, 6 WMS positions, 1 WMS Band 3. The incumbent is currently at the band maximum and can only receive legislatively authorized general wage increases if OFM adjusts the bands. 4 WMS Band 2 positions. Currently, both research and policy positions have OFM approved incumbent-based exceptions to the current Band 2 salary maximum and can only receive legislatively authorized general wage increases. These exceptions were granted on the basis of special skills and qualifications, as well as documented retention issues. When either or both of these incumbents leave the agency, any recruitment could only take place at the evaluated band maximum. There is 1 WMS Band 1. During the last legislative session, a collective bargaining bill passed for Washington Management Service employees. The bill is effective January 1st of 2024. Union organizing efforts are currently taking place. Excluded from bargaining are employees in positions within Washington Management Service Salary Band 3, Salary Band 4, and the Medical Band, as well as role exclusions such as Human Resources, Budget, and Risk and Litigation Managers. Bargaining over wages will be limited to the WMS salary band levels, not individual WMS classifications or positions. Any collective bargaining agreement for WMS will not take place before July 1st of 2025. that's the basic framework around the salaries that we have. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer those.
Jay?
Thank you, Karen. Mr. Chair, not so much a question, but I'm just flashing back to our conversation at our last meeting around this. And so it seems like we have some options here. One is status quo, which means that the left two plan board positions, the staff positions stay within the banding structure, which, as we talked about last time, and have not had a salary survey within that structure in the 30 years of its existence is crazy making to me. I'll just say that out loud. Or do we have the option as a board to take those employees out of the banding structure and create a different kind of a structure whereas the board has more say in terms of pay and other benefits and things like that? So I'm just trying to make sure I understand kind of what our options are in terms of what our discussion points are here.
Karen, can you go over the discussion you had with the board's AAG on that point?
Yeah, Tor and I just got some, I guess it was what I was expecting, but basically because of the statute that we have in place for the creation of the agency, it specifies that the positions will be under the RCW for that. So short of a legal change, it has to stay the way that it is.
So does that mean it would take legislation to?
Yes.
Okay.
That was what it took several years ago to change your authority with respect to my position, was it took legislation.
Well, I'll just say from my view, I certainly have an interest here in having more discussion about this. I don't know where the rest of the board sits, but I'm just really struggling with this one. And it seems like I'd like to explore some other possibilities. I'll just put that out there and see if anybody else is interested.
Okay, Mark?
I'm interested in exploring other legislative options. My preference would be that we pass or submit a bill to the legislature. What big picture? I don't have language, drawn up, but what I think we should be doing is providing all the employees, staff employees for the board with the ability to collectively bargain outside the current statute. And they should be able to bargain like cops and firefighters in Washington, and I'd be in favor of binding arbitration at the end of that for those employees. I mean, I think they deserve to be able to collectively bargain with their employer. And it's a benefit that we all enjoy. We sort of take for granted, I think, but it speaks to their abilities and it speaks to their basic rights as workers and employees to be able to do that. So that would be my preference. And I know it would take a legislative change, and I know there's a lot of probably be a certain amount of resistance to that. But I think it's the fair thing to do for the employees and the services that they provide. And I'll reiterate what I've been saying for years, which is it's our fiduciary responsibility to make sure that we can recruit and retain employees that do the work that they do to benefit all of our members, all the 18,000 police officers and firefighters that we have jurisdiction over and left to. And I think it's the right thing to do. So that would be my discussion points for what I think the best option for our members and their families and the staff and the citizens, to tell you the truth. The citizens of Washington State benefit from the work that the staff does. And I think that we could put all those people in the state of Washington in the same bucket and have a reasonable collective bargaining process with the employees.
By order, I'm gonna ask a question real quick. By order of process, if we decided we wanted to, as Jay said, explore this further, and at some point, if we decided to move forward with legislation, the legislation could be, and I'm with Mark on this thing, a global picture, but I'm trying to figure out kind of like steps. Would the process be that we would have a bill that would allow the board the authority to set wages, and then once they're outside of that banding process, then their rights as employees, could they, I'm looking at TOR too, could they then at that point petition to create a bargaining unit under the state that for wages as well? I don't want one to get mixed up with the other one.
We're just brainstorming stuff, but for instance, the bargaining issue for WMS is huge and it's still in play. It hasn't even gone into effect yet. So starting to making changes or exceptions to WMS bargaining might be difficult and have unintended consequences. One possible approach, Karen mentioned, larger agencies have their own authority to set the bands for their employees. Because of the size of the board, we don't. And so we have to use DES, and that's been problematic. So one possibility would be to transfer the banding authority to the board, where you would set the bands for the staff. Similarly, the statute requires that if you are approving an exception above the band, that has to be done by the director of OFM. Another possibility for a board bill would be that you would set the bands, and then to the extent that you ever felt that there was a need for an exception to the band that you set, that you would also set that exception. Those would be the kind of options that we could bring back to you, just brainstorming out loud. And then the bargaining would be layered on top of that, and that will come into play down the road and for those members who'd be covered by it. But then that way, that I think accomplishes the board salary setting authority, and there'll be other options too, I'm sure. But off the top of my head, those were a couple of possibilities that we could bring back to you for a bill.
Jason.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question and an observation. So first question for you, Karen, on the banding, and understandable, you may not be able to answer this now. In my profession right now, pay has been a hot topic as far as compensation, and the number of studies that have been done nationwide is significant right now, specifically in law enforcement. And in those studies, at least for me speaking on behalf of the agency that I work for, there's no banding, but there's been studies in pay structures. And so it's a little disconcerting. I agree with Jay that nothing's been done in 30 years. Is somewhat befuddling to me, but also, it's government, right? So it's also not surprising, and that's a sad statement, I think. But in the reference to my question on banding, and what does that banding look like? And is that public sector? Does that include private sector? Because we all know that people have specific skill sets that work not only in government, but also work in private sector. And so when it comes to retention or recruitment, I have to pull somebody potentially from a private sector opportunity, but also I don't want to lose a person to a private sector opportunity because I want to keep a quality employee, because the most important asset we have on this board are our employees, hands down. I think everybody would agree with this. I could be replaced tomorrow and somebody could say, here's what the expectations are, you're a board member, boom, right? I can't do that with the employees who work here. And so that being said, what does that banding look like?
I brought up the structure as it currently is. As I mentioned earlier, it was created 30 years ago with the intention of allowing agencies a lot of flexibility in setting those salaries, in determining internal alignment, all of the things above. Because the numbers of people basically managing state government is fairly small, it's been let be. So essentially, if you have a new position, you do the position description. That position is evaluated by either your internal committee or an external committee. Most of the positions that are here at the board were evaluated quite a while ago under the jurisdiction of the Department of Personnel before DES became into being. The requirements on the evaluation are very much slanted for large to mid-size agencies. So it's very, very complicated to try and score the positions into a band 3 or band 4. Just because it limits like dollar amounts, it has thresholds, it's very complicated. It's a combination of numbers and letters where you evaluate out. Then agencies are allowed within that. Steve's a band 2, Karen's a band 2. Well, obviously y'all are gonna say she's worth more. So that internal alignment thing comes into play, and you're gonna put that into perspective within your respective agencies. So it's not an easy thing at all. And as you all are aware, several years ago, you passed legislation to change how Steve's salary is set. OFM thought that they had authority over that. Records were kind of lost to really get at where did that land when the agency was created. So you had to pass legislation that clarified that. Just to remind you, the law says that that salary is under your jurisdiction, but you're required to consult with the Office of Financial Management, and then notify the legislature. So it's more of a back and forth with that consultation too.
Jen? So what's the practical effect of that when you say you have to consult with them? How does that work in practice?
We haven't had that challenged yet. So far, we've been notifying them of everything. We have not engaged with them on the consultation simply because all we've done since that legislation has passed is done general wage increases. And so those are very specific in the budget where the legislature says we're authorizing a 3% or a 4%, and we're providing money for that for exempt and Washington Management Service employees. So the money's given with kind of the intent that it's meant to be applied in that fashion. For us, it is not. Yes.
Inside those bands, how many different steps? Is it like 10 steps between them, 12 steps, or?
There are no steps. So some agencies have what's called an internal range of consideration. And those, like, for example, Washington General Service, those salary ranges are between 31 and 34% capacity from the bottom to the top. The band has a lot more capacity. So, like a band 1 is like 100%, 104%, and a band 4 is 72%. So it's that flexibility that doesn't have kind of the confines of some of the more granular general service positions. But when you don't do anything or study that or look at that for 30 years.
Right. One sec. Okay.
And Steve, you'd mentioned that there's some, it's kind of nebulous between WMS, versus DES, as far as where we kind of get jockeyed back and forth depending on what the band is on that. Would it be prudent to, as we go forward on this, is making a determination like where that actually should fall or where we want it to fall?
Like the DES, like when we worked with them on the ombudsman positions, for instance, they listened to us when we suggested where we thought they should be banded. But that was not part of the consideration. The employer's desires, when Karen was listing all the different criteria that they use to evaluate banding, the desires of the employer was not one of those official criteria. So they're looking at the scope of authority, policy making, budget, supervisory responsibilities. They've got a very strict kind of criteria. And that, from my experience, that's changed over the years. So for instance, when the board was first created, we were under the banding was done by a committee at the Department of Personnel. Positions were banded at a certain level. And then 10 years later, Department of Personnel is done away with and Department of Enterprise Services takes over that responsibility. The exact same position with the exact same job description now is being banded differently. And sometimes that can happen in a very short period of time. It has to do with the environment, if you will, political environment, or so for instance, we had the ombudsman position. It was approved, banded, and then just a couple of years later, another ombudsman position was added. And the initial feedback was, yeah, that's not going to get banded the same as the previous one. And we're like, that didn't make any sense. But that they were responding to what they felt was a change in their approval authority or their operating environment by either the legislature or OFM or both, in terms of being more restrictive on what positions were approved for WMS. And so that kind of ambiguity has come into play, and it's flip-flop back and forth over the 20 years that I've been here. That's part of the navigation. Now, I will say, eventually, working with DES, we did get approval for the second ombudsman position at the exact same banding level as the previous one. So although it was a more difficult exercise than I expected going into it, we ultimately ended up at the spot where I felt it was appropriate. I will say, for instance, that part of that was having Karen here, handling that. I don't know if I'd had to do it. I don't know that it would have ended up the same. So, having somebody with the expertise that she had that I didn't particularly in this area was very critical to the success of that project with that banding project. But ultimately they did end up where we were hoping they would end up. Hopefully I didn't say too much and get you into trouble, Karen.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. God, I swear, every time I have a question, all of a sudden there's 16 other things that happen and all the fingers of threads of discussion evolve in front of me. Just a point, 30 years ago when we established the banding, at a nominal dollar amount on that, without taking into consideration skill sets, expertise, changes in the market conditions, the availability and competitiveness, for those skill sets, would we be able to do something just as simple as using 30 years ago when they passed this bandwidth, when they structured this, to use that as a base year and come forward with a COLA on that and show how that absolutely has been left behind by a COLA, much less some sort of a specific, market condition that we're currently here. And would that be a benefit?
The COLA piece has to do with sort of the general economic changes that have taken place since then. What I spoke to last month, and the piece that I do feel from my experience is challenging, is that in virtually every other state, pension boards that manage the pension plans either are not state agencies or they operate as quasi-state agencies. And so they the market recognizes the fact that expertise in pensions is a skill which is not universal and is highly valuable, and Washington does not. And so, for instance, we had Marcy Frost. She's the director of the Department of Retirement Systems. She's the chair of the State Investment Board. She's the chair of the Select Committee on Pension Policy. She has all this experience, and she's being paid as a Band 4. CalPERS does not operate under that same self-imposed limitation. They saw the experience and expertise that she had, and her compensation reflects that expertise, and she's been extraordinarily successful for CalPERS. It was a great hire for them, but there's it's a challenge that the State Investment Board faces, for instance, in recruiting and retaining people with investment expertise. You don't need investment officers in most state agencies, but you need them at the SIB. And so the statewide structure has been altered a little bit with respect to the SIB and those specific positions, but there's never been that same type of consideration of altering the structure to reflect pension expertise. So that's why, Marcy was just one. There were 6 different people that I worked with at Department of Retirement Systems who all left the state of Washington to become directors of retirement systems elsewhere, and all got significant compensation increases as a result of doing so.
So to draw a conclusion from what you just told me, you're saying that it doesn't matter what we do to this banding, that we are unique and a completely separate animal. One size does not fit all.
I think for some of the positions that's true. The pension expertise, for instance, the research and policy position is a perfect example. Jacob's expertise, not only, my competition for Jacob is the legislature, but also the person in filling his position before Jacob. If you remember Ryan Frost, Ryan was hired by one of the national pension think tanks at a significant increase in compensation. So there's competition for people who have that demonstrated skill set. That's where the challenge comes from.
I'm asking this. I'm trying to get a sense of direction that we should go, rather than wasting time on other issues out there that appear to be low-hanging fruit right in front of us. A COLA, an inflator, implicit inflator, this attaches kind of thing. If we're doing something that's totally separate, that we need to address an issue that's fairly isolated.
So the COLA is more of a one-size-fits-all approach, and I don't think it fits well for this type of challenge.
Mr.
That's
Chair,
my
can I ask one more
personal
question as a complete sidebar here?
Sure.
Karen, just the language that Mark brought up about what consult defines as, is there any language at all in the current legislation that either requires OFM ratification or allows them veto authority over our decision-making process, or is it more of a casual decision-making consulting?
The way the current statute reads, that we are all staff, with the exception of Steve, are under 4106, the civil service law. So it would have to, and that's a pretty hard stop on that. So I think that's kind of the barrier at this point. The system, the structure is owned by OFM. They are the ones that control the bands.
Thank you.
And just point of clarification, agency directors' salaries are under a separate thing called SOSA. And so the Office of Financial Management does separate surveys for those positions, and they have been adjusted quite significantly. But it's a separate process. They do have bands, but it's by also scope of authority. For example, DSHS, OFM, Healthcare Authority, they're in the first tier, and so on and so forth with different agency directors.
Patrick. So, Karen, when we talk about consult, so I'm kind of thick-headed at times. So consult means they can tell us no.
Yes.
Okay, that's where I want to.
We've not tested that.
And that's the next question, because our funds don't come out of the general fund. Ours comes out of our investment returns.
And I think the design of having I believe the original legislation said the board will set the salary.
Yeah.
End of story. And I believe there was an amendment that said it requires the consultation. So that was an add-on.
And I go back to in 98, 99, I was on the investment board. They had a certain type of issue going too, because people that don't make as much as somebody else has a hard time approving somebody else's salary range sometimes. And so they try and hold that down. And at the time, we had an investment officer that was probably the sharpest. We had one before him, and he ended up at Cal Stirs. And then we received the next guy that came up. And one of the things that came out was when OFM told us this is a salary range and we're not going to hire, somebody said, there's only so much of the view of Washington State that somebody's going to put up with before they leave. And so they actually authorized, that's why the State Investment Board has their own ranges. I think if you check what the investment officer's making there versus any place in the United States, they're getting pretty comparable because of their successes. And that has a whole lot to do with the difference between what we do here and what they do over there, because we are the only pension board within Washington State. We have different expertise that we need done to make sure that we have one of the most successful pension plans in the country. Over the years, I think if you look at the amount of money that the investment board has made with the policies that the board have set, our pension fund is probably in one of the best shapes in the country. And it's because it's to a certain extreme, I'd say, because we listen to our staff, but it's the staff that gives us the recommendations to our policies that moves us forward, that makes us as successful as we are. And I think those are the arguments that we take when we go. I think we push the limit. I think we go after them and say, okay, we're going to consult with you, and this is what we're going to tell you. Tell us we're wrong. And so, Mr. Director, I think it's time to finally start looking at that, or we're going to continue to lose people. I mean, we lost Marcy. We know we lost, we've lost great talent, not only from this board, but from other expertise positions that are needed to run certain systems within the state organization. And when I say state organization, I mean the state. So, Karen, I appreciate your time here, and I know it's very frustrating because I remember when they came in with the bans, and I used to talk about before they moved into this building, they were considering making some of the office spaces bigger than what they were in the previous place. I'm going to get in trouble here. I'm going to do it anyways. So, and they go over there. They said, we need 2 more feet this way, and we need 2 more feet this way, and we all know who authorizes when you come up with a plan on office space, who makes that. And they turn around, they said no. And I go, well, they're doing it. I said, because they're in an 8x10 and you want to give this guy a 10x12, and they're not going to do it. We had to actually bring the director over and say, this is why we need the extra space. And I said, and unless we push forward on on people in certain situations to show them the qualifications and everything else and the expertise we need, I believe that's what we need to do. So that's Wasn't really a question, it was a statement.
Yeah, Ben, I want to point out something.
Ouch.
Well, I take back everything I said, Mr.
I agree with you. Did you have something before I go to Jay?
I did. And so this is kind of to let a little bit more air into it, and then also for the people that weren't here. The challenge that we had, you know, with Steve's banding a couple years ago was not a simple process. And it sounds like it is, right? Because we just discussed, the board says, here's, we can set the salary. And then all you have to do is just consult OFM. And that wasn't the case. I mean, it became more convoluted. It became more difficult. We didn't quite have the authority that we thought we had as the board. And it just kind of went on and on and on. And then ultimately what happened was we had to pass legislation, which again, to me, it's been said numerous times where it's like, it's kind of the last resort. You really don't want to have to pass legislation to fix something that can be fixed. I think Senator Burnquist said that earlier, because of, you know, the scope that it comes in. And here we are, we're discussing this again, where we, in order to fix something, we're at a point where we have to pass legislation. And like I said, I bring that up for the folks that weren't here, for the wonderful experience that we had with going through this in the past. And I think it's definitely worth exploring. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Jay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and maybe I'll try to tie a bow on this one for today, but I'll just say, as has been pointed out, I think the work of the staff that supports this board is unique. It is important, and their retention is vital to the success of this board and the members that we serve. And I think that which has been said, I think multiple times in this discussion, I think the WMS banding is outdated in terms of a compensation structure. They're not paid out of the general fund. I think that's another important piece that we should be considering. So I guess what I would like to ask is just for what our options might be. I'd like for some further conversation about options maybe at an upcoming meeting, so we can figure out where we go from here. And if that means legislation, then let's set about writing it.
Yeah, we can bring you some ideas in December.
Other questions for Karen? Don't you leave yet. I see you. All right. Thank you so much. All right. Number 8 on our list. Who's it? Jacob again.
All right. So one of the issues that came again out of the ombudsman bill last year and then was brought forward at your work plan earlier, this interim has to do with DRS appeal deadlines. And this is something that's set in WAC, and some issues regarding the existing process were brought to the attention of the board. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Jacob, to walk us through the comprehensive on this.
Okay, so for the record, Jacob White, staff to the board. The issue in front of the board here is that some Left 2 members have missed their deadline to file an administrative appeal with DRS and expressed concerns to the board regarding a lack of clarity on those deadlines. Yeah, it feels a little strange to be doing this right after I gave a presentation talking about how pension benefits do not have deadlines compared to L9 benefits, but all agencies are subject to the APA, the Administrative Procedures Act, and the deadlines that go with appealing agency administrative decisions. And so the APA has sets minimum standards for agencies, and that's a minimum of 20 days to file an appeal. And there's no tolling requirement, which that issue I'll come back to as I move forward. And then last time, I didn't know this off the top of my head, but someone asked about the deadline to file in Superior Court, and that is 30 days. So, like I said, that's the minimum standards. So we're going to look at the DRS's APA process. And there can be, we're mostly talking about, it was the two situations that we're talking about here were member issues, not employer issues, but it is important to note that this does also apply to employers, but the initial part of it can look a little different for employers depending on what the administrative decision the employer is appealing comes out of. If it comes out of something like an audit, they kind of jump ahead in the process straight to having petition rights. But for most situations, and I think all member situations, you receive an initial decision from DRS, and then you have to request an administrative decision. There's no deadline to ask for that administrative decision. After that, there's 120 days to file for a petition decision, and that is not a required process for an agency to have. It's something that years ago, I've got a slide coming up since at least 2001. Yeah, I think 2001 DRS created the petition process. And that was another opportunity for the agency to give a more thorough review. The staff who typically would be making administrative decisions are making more of those. And so at the petition level, there's less decisions being appealed that far. Typically, they've had an attorney in that position, an opportunity for a more thorough review, opportunity to work with the member to provide more detail, more information to the agency before. And also it's almost like designed to be kind of an alternative dispute resolution process in some ways, where it's not as formal as an appeal process. At the appeal level, you're in front of a judge, an ALJ, administrative law judge, and it's a more formal, intimidating process. And so the deadline for petitions is the 120 days. And then after that, if you want to appeal that, it's 60 days to file an appeal. And then just a little bit of history on this. Worked with DRS to just get some information of how far back these deadlines went, because I'd never heard that. And so the 60-day time frame to an appeal went back to at least 93. That was as far back as the rulemaking file had information. And then on the petition, and I should say they may have been able to find it further back. I just didn't want them to go through, dig through all of the old records. And then 120 days time frame to file a petition has been in place since 2001. Then also I worked with DRS to get some data around petitions and appeals. So in the last, just had them go back the last 5 years, and DRS has received 75 petitions, 25 of those from Left 2, and none of those have been denied for not being timely. And then in the last 5 years, there have been 37 appeals, 14 from Left 2 members, and 2 of those were denied for not being timely. Although I should add, DRS said technically just 1 because 1 is still under appeal. So that's still being considered, last I heard. And so I don't want to get too much into like the specifics of those 2 cases, but I did just want to say there were, I would say, extenuating circumstances where those were not just as simple as they got a petition. The petition decision typically would have, not typically, it should have, hopefully it always has, the deadline for when your appeal needs to be filed by. But both of those situations, there was confusion over members being given conflicting information, such as gathering more records that you could, asking them to provide more information to DRS with a different deadline than the deadline that was given for the appeal. And that's why I mentioned the tolling earlier, that there was no tolling, there's no tolling requirement in the APA, and DRS does not have any tolling mechanism for when they, in rule that requires them to have tolling if they ask someone to provide more information. Not that they couldn't choose to do that, but there's nothing in rule or law requiring it. So policy options in front of the board today. Option 1 would be to require tolling. So this option would toll the time to file an appeal when DRS requests the member provide additional information. Number 2 would be to extend the time to file an appeal to 120 days. This would match up with the petition process. Pat's got a question.
Yeah, I was going to let you finish, but let's go ahead and back up to that last slide.
Yeah.
Not this one, the one before it. Okay, now I got a couple, because I think I picked up on it, but I'm not sure. And I want to make sure I understand it. So you got 120 days to file a petition. So if I decided to file a petition, is the clock running on the appeals time?
No.
So in other words, the clock doesn't run until after I get the petition.
Yeah, when you get the petition decision, it'll have a notification at the bottom with your appeal deadline.
Okay. So if I appeal and they ask for more information,
it's still
does the clock stop on the appeal, or is the appeal time clock still spinning before I?
It keeps going, at least in the situation.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so option 2 would be extend that time to file an appeal to 120 days to match up with the petition deadline. And then option 3 would be to combine both of those options. Did have some pros and cons to go over. Really just combine these because I felt the pros and cons were the exact same or close to it. So the pros would be that it gives members, employers, and DRS more time to get all the necessary information by allowing for tolling, allowing for more time. Just helps ensure that the right decision is made. And it helps prevent members and employers from missing deadlines to file an appeal. The concerns are that this could be dealt with in rulemaking or possibly changes to procedure instead of changing the law. Could look at, working with DRS to improve communication to members about their appeals rights, petition rights, the deadlines, whether or not they are giving tolling. Could continue to look at those instead of working through legislation. So next steps are the board could motion for a final briefing on options 1, 2, or 3, or choose to take no action at this time. If there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Jacob, is tolling a practice now?
No.
It's not at all. So if an individual, like in Pat's example, he files an appeal and he's told to get additional information and get that back in 90 days, the clock's already running.
Yes. Now, I believe it would be, the DRS would have the authority to allow that, and I can't say for certain that they've never allowed it. Just in the situation we're aware of over the last 5 years, they did not allow it.
Yeah, that was the example that one of the left members brought to us. Is they had a 60-day appeal deadline. They were contacted, said, do you have additional information? And they said they did. And they said, okay, you've got 90 days to provide that additional information. And they provided it within the 90 days. But then they were told, sorry, you were after the 60 days. So thank you for the additional information, but your case is dismissed for being untimely.
And I think that's what I was getting at. If it would have been a petition, they would have had the time. But they weren't told about that because they had filed an appeal, and then they were told and when they said they had additional information, they said, okay, you got 90 days, but the clock was running on the appeals.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I mean, does anybody understand the shell game? I mean,
if we did, we wouldn't.
So I know there's a situation. And instead of allowing the time to go, they just decided that they didn't meet their appeal time and they dropped it.
Yes, although my understanding is that case is still with DRS at the appeals level, so we don't have. I was really hoping to have a final decision before giving this briefing to you today, but yeah, we do not have a final decision on that. Last I heard.
Have they ever? One more,
yeah, please.
Have they ever had this situation come up before and rule a different way?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know if all, Steve, no.
Practice has kind of changed over the time. So for instance, Jacob mentioned that the 120-day petition deadline began in 2001. I was the legal services manager in 2001, and that was, we were setting up, we just had a new position to handle rulemaking, and that was one of the areas where we identified we needed some more structure. The idea then was 120 days, give them time. They don't need to use it. They can, if they have their stuff together and they want to get moving, they can. And if they need time to get their stuff together, they've got it. And it was just seen as like a customer service. It was no real detriment to the Department of Retirement Systems. At that time, they didn't feel like to, force the member to expedite things. Now, since that time, things have changed. And so you end up with a backlog of petitions, or you end up with, different policy, kind of different outlooks. So, for instance, at the time when I was there as well, the idea was we're never going to dismiss somebody for being untimely because there's no barrier to them just filing a new petition. So just work with them and keep it going. Now, since that time, and that's where one of these DRS, their philosophy changed, and they had somebody and they dismissed them and took them all the way to court and won and said, you're out. It wasn't timely. But that happened, that was a relatively recent phenomenon. I want to say that court case, that was one of the other two members. That court case was within the last 3 years. So that's kind of similar to what we were talking about earlier, where the agency, or an agency's perception of banding can change over 20 years. An agency's perception of the importance of making members adhere to a strict timeline can change over 20 years.
Mr. Chair, and I guess that's where I'm going to. I mean, there's the letter of the law and there's the intent of the law, and it's being interpreted sometimes. If somebody is given a 90-day window, I mean, and the clock is ticking on at 60 days, you'd think that somebody would have reached out and says, but you're still turned in this, and they allowed it to run out, and it wasn't anybody's fault. They were told they had the extension, but then when it came down to it and they were headed for court, or they were going to get a decision, they decided to pull out the letter of the law. And that took a member, and it cost a member, it probably cost them something, or he or she wouldn't have appealed it. Correct?
Yes.
Just want to make sure I got it right. Sometimes it's hard to follow.
Jason.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question. So, I'm trying to get my head wrapped around the tolling, and maybe this is a question for you and Steve, but in this example that we're talking about, where you have the 90 days, but then 60 expired. So, would tolling have mitigated that, or created an opportunity for a misunderstanding to not happen?
It would be the intent of writing a bill would be for it to accomplish that. We'd have to be careful to write it in a way that would accomplish that.
Yes, but I mean the goal is to benefit the person who is going through this application process, so it's fair and equitable, right?
Yes.
So would tolling do that? I guess that's maybe a better way to phrase my question.
I believe so, because we would need to word it in a way that if an agency told someone they had more time, that then they had to actually give them more time. Yeah.
Correct. Okay, thank you.
Jacob, I was looking at one of your slides that had the DRS data, and I'm thankful that we've only have, or I guess you could look the other way. Unfortunately, we've had 75, petitions, right? And then it goes down further that we've had in that same time frame appeals on the petitions, which is 37. So numbers are not huge by any means, but again, it's unfortunate for those people going through that process. And then you get down, thankfully, there's only 2, but unfortunately, if you're one of the 2, that's terrible. And my question is, because on one of the cons or the pros on that last sheet is that the numbers are so small, and it seems like this is just this is actually an interpretation. I mean, this really is on how you want to manage something. Is why is this one not going through the rulemaking process? This to me seems way simple, and we're not talking about basis points. We're not talking about anything but customer service. And I'm just curious, what's the conversation been?
Yeah, so this was one that last year before session, Steve and I were meeting with DRS and having discussions with this. And Steve can help me out here, but I believe at the end they told us that not that they weren't legally allowed to change this, but they were not interested in doing so. I believe I've couched that correctly.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's easier than me saying a whole lot of words. Why? Yeah. I maybe Sean or Seth. I mean, I hate to ask you, but you guys have any input? It just from a customer service standpoint, it seems like, oh, Seth, I can't believe it. Look at Sean; he's already started nodding.
Lost the rod. I think there's probably some interesting fact patterns on these specific ones that, as Jacob said, one is still in active appeal status, so I probably don't want to go into too much detail there. But I think generally we feel comfortable with the deadlines as they're set. As Jacob mentioned, the APA deadlines are 20 days. We feel like 60 or 90 or 120, wherever you set those deadlines. I think there certainly is confusion, as you've all heard a little bit, between we have a petition process and then an appeal process, and people might not know which process they're in. And so that could cause confusion. I think the point I wanted to clarify from Jacob's statements is that a person, when they file a petition or file an appeal, they can still provide additional information. It's not a finalized document. There's back and forth, there's discovery depending on where you're at in the process. It isn't an end point. Like you're always able to provide additional information. And so I think that's one of the things that I wanted to make sure I was able to clarify for the group. I think the other concern I have, I will speak for DRS on this, I guess, and not say my own opinion. It is, I think, the position of the agency is that we also, I think, have heard more feedback over the 5 or 10 or 15 years that this process takes a long time. And so adding additional time on the front end then extends the back end. As Steve mentioned, there have been times in the past where there have been significant backlogs for these petition and appeal process. And so we also want to make sure that there's a timely process for folks to get an answer one way or the other, and then continue on through the process. If they're unsuccessful, to then go through the, Superior Court process or, a more elevated legal process. I saw there was a question, so I'll pause.
There is. Patrick?
So hypothetically, I decide to appeal. And I come to you and I said, I'm going to appeal, but I have this extra, I got more information. And you send me back something that says, okay, and we'll give you 90 days. Now I've already filed the appeal, so it's 60 days running, yet I get a letter from you telling me I've got 90 days to file this stuff.
In your hypothetical example, you've already filed an appeal, so you're already in the appeal process. So there are, I'm going to maybe rely more on Jacob on this because he's more familiar with this process, but there are pre-trial hearings, there are conferences, there's different dates and deadlines set through the legal or quasi-legal process. And so you're already in that process. I think that's maybe part of what the confusion is that you have to get into the process. You have to start the process by filing an appeal. If you never file the appeal, you haven't gotten into the process.
Right.
And I think that's sort of what I heard you saying in your example, is maybe there was an assumption that you weren't already in the process. And I think that's...
Yeah, can I ask a question?
And maybe just let me add maybe one.
Do you see what's going on right now?
I do.
I think where you got everybody so confused now, I think nobody knows who's on first.
Well,
and that's what I'm trying to get to, is that no matter how you do this, having the different dates, people get confused. And then all of a sudden they come up thinking, you ever heard there's an old line saying, yeah, I went to court to get justice. And when I got there, I was right, just us. And that's what happens, because then the process, what you think you're following through in the process, is not the process that you understand, because you thought you knew what the process was. I was given extra time, not knowing that at the end of the day, that extra time they gave me gave the extra time to have my appeal time run out.
Yeah,
And then I'm penalized because I listened to what the people told me to do. And at the end of the day, I'm standing there with nothing in my hands. There, I cleaned it up.
Well, and maybe
So-
maybe I can provide a clarifying example at a level that maybe makes more sense for the group, and I'll come back. I know you have a question as well. But if you're in Superior Court and you lose in Superior Court, you have the ability to appeal to Court of Appeals.
Who's paying that cost?
Well, you as
No, how about that?
But you also have the ability to ask Superior Court to reconsider their decision. So you're at two different levels at the same time. It doesn't mean that the Superior Court process stops, though, or that the Court of Appeals process
But
stops.
in
And
the
that's why I want to.
The Superior Court is ruling on the idea that I missed my timeline. And that's the information they're getting from the opposition side saying, you had a case, but sorry, buddy, you missed your timeline. And I'm going off of what you told me that I did miss my timeline. Yeah, you bring it in and now all of a sudden I get pounded. And now I have to spend more money to take it to an appellate court to have it overturned, maybe. And if that doesn't work, then I always got the Supreme Court, I guess.
Yeah.
And in each place, I'm a retiree. I am trying to make a living on a fixed income. And there's another, you can run me out of money before I get through all my appeals. And then what do I got to do? I got to drop the appeal.
Yeah.
So I'm still, I lost, even though I should have won. Because if I had the information to prove my case, it should have happened at the first location, not the second, not the third. It should have been, okay, yeah, he or she got more information. We got all the information we needed. Let's rule on the intent of what this law is about, not the idea of the rule.
No,
so I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying the process itself is so confusing, and it's created problems to where we're going to have to go probably and make changes instead of have somebody just go, yeah, you're right. And we go right back to what we were talking about earlier today about, we can make the change. We don't have to go through this to make the rule change because you just said it's because we're comfortable with our time frame.
Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to clarify on my example, because I agree with what you're saying, and the department agrees with what you're saying 100%, that DRS wants to make decisions on the facts and not on what I think you would deem technicalities. But in the example I was trying to provide was that the Superior Court is making the decision on the facts, but the timeline for your appeal is still running. But I'm sorry, Dennis.
So, I mean, Seth, from my standpoint, it's confusing.
Yeah.
And again, we're talking about people who have paid into the program. Why or how come you just doesn't, I mean, this to me, again, seems very simple.
No,
we're talking about either tolling, which is using both time frames. So there's not that confusion and somebody's going to get cut out. And if that would maybe, yes, I agree with you. It could add some time to maybe already viewed upon as a lengthy time frame, but it's again, 75 people, then it's down to 37 people, then we're down to 2 people.
Yeah.
I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. This is not something that's going to burden the agency by any means.
No, and I agree with what you're saying, and I want to maybe clarify or I think part of the confusion is just this additional petition step in the middle. It's not a requirement that the agency has this, and as Steve mentioned, this was something the department created decades ago. And it's something I know Jacob and I have talked about over a number of time periods of, is it a necessary step for the agency to even have this additional stage? I think one of our positions has been it is beneficial before a person gets to a more formal court process to have the opportunity, because most of these folks aren't represented by attorneys or by at least at that stage, they are just trying to present their case or why they believe the department has made a decision that they disagree with or they believe the decision is wrong. And so the petition process allows a person kind of a more informal opportunity to present that case. And as you continue through the process, it becomes a more formal legal process.
So we had laid out 3 options before us and really kind of just simple yes or no at this point. the agency willing to do rulemaking to solve a problem that affects the membership, and it seems to be a very small number?
Yeah, I don't think the department sees it as a issue. And I think the other concern is it wherever you set the deadline. And this was a point that I know all of you brought up when you were talking about the benefit enhancement a number of months ago. Wherever you set the deadline, there's the possibility of folks falling on one side or the other of it. And I think that would be part of the concern as well for the department. And I would just, I think, once again, try to reinforce with the tolling question is that a person can always file a petition or always file an appeal and then present additional information.
Is that shared with people?
Yeah, it's part of being the informal process. I think, especially at that first petition step, is that this is probably most common, I think, in disability cases where there's still evolving medical situations where a person's, I'm going to have a doctor's appointment in 6 weeks. I'm going to be able to have more information at that point. Or at a pre-hearing conference, we'll schedule that pre-hearing conference for after L&I is going to make a decision or determination or provide additional information.
That was one of the other pieces of confusion that happened in, at least I think in both of these cases, is what constitutes filing an appeal. So if I get a petition decision and I don't like it, and I contact DRS and I say, I think this decision is wrong, and I have additional information that would support my contention, it's reasonable that that person might feel like they have filed an appeal without, but if you don't use the magic words, appeal, you haven't. So that was another piece of the potential confusion that went on, I think, in both of these cases, is the members felt like they were, that by contesting the petition decision, they didn't realize that they, and DRS is in some ways very open. You can send in an email with one sentence that says, I appeal my petition decision, and they'll accept that. But if you send in an email that says, I disagree with my petition decision and I'd like to talk with you about it further, well, that doesn't work. So there's there's some inconsistency, and that's another area of potential confusion that I think came up in both of these cases as well.
One last thing. I just got to put it.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So Seth, you're sitting there, so you get it. But I think this goes back to one of the first things we were talking about. And I think it goes to the statement of one of the judges that said it's important to recognize the distinction. Widows are not supposed to have to hire lawyers in order to receive a benefit. And if I'm going to Superior Court, I probably got an attorney. And that's costing me money. Where if all of a sudden DRS would just change their timelines, you got, I think Dennis said it best, you got two. And it just makes more sense for customer service and everything else. I don't even know what this would have costed DRS to settle or whatever, but it doesn't make sense that we've gone this far so long and we're arguing about it right now, or we're discussing it right now on this board, where it seems like it'd be a lot easier for DRS has a lot of power to make decisions. And it sounds like sometimes they just pull out the cleaver and cut. So, which sometimes it might be better to use a surgeon's knife. So, just a heads up.
Any comments or questions? All right, so we do have before us Jacob. Thank you, Seth. Before you have under number 1, you had option 1 was tolling, option 2, 120 days, option 3 was both, or number 2, which was no action. Entertain some direction.
Mr. Chair, make a motion for option number 3.
Second.
So under number 1 would be option 3, which would be both.
Correct.
Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of option 3, which includes the tolling and the 120 days. As far as this, we come back, Jacob, make sure I got this right. This will come back again, correct?
Yes.
Yes, in December?
December. I'll have Bill draft language and work with DRS and OSA on it.
Okay. All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Yeah, abstention.
Yep. One abstention, yes. All right, so next up on our list was the number 9 was the 2024 meeting calendar adoption. And it was presented last meeting, and I think everybody had a chance hopefully to take a look at it. We did identify one conflict. It was the state council. Our state organization had our convention in the wrong week, and gave a couple different choices as where we were. Our meeting in May is set for May 29th. The meeting in June was going to initially be June 26th, but as I stated, that's our convention. So they moving it up a week, it would be either and I think they proposed either the 17th or the 21st. Now, I may have conflicts with both those, but for you, and that's why we have Jason here as our vice chair, I definitely can run a meeting. So out of those, what works best? The other option was June 12th, but to be honest, just even looking at that, it's 2 weeks after our other meeting, a little too close. Yeah. So I would, just for thoughts, is there a preference, 17 or 21? Yep. You like Friday meetings? Seriously? Oh, okay. So seriously, yeah, every day's Friday.
I don't, doesn't matter.
What is it? I mean, Jay, I know that your schedule, Senator, Representative Request, haven't moved you up yet. I haven't moved you up yet. Sorry.
I did.
I'm just looking at school calendar. Usually around the 18th is last day school. It'd be nice to do earlier than that rather than after school gets out. But that's not a lot of us probably have kids in school, but just throwing that out there.
Would you again, 17, 12, or 21?
We're talking June.
June, yeah. Those were the 3 dates. June 12th was the second Tuesday or Wednesday of the month. June 17 was the third Monday. June 21st was the third Friday.
I'll just say, for me, Mondays are a way better day of the week to do it than a Friday. My Friday calendar is just awful, unfortunately.
17 for me.
Can we make a motion?
Sure.
Motion 17th of June for the monthly meeting.
Okay. Second. Motion's been made and seconded to change. Well, it's not adopted yet to change the proposed schedule to June 17th. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, 17th will be the date. As far as the calendar, do we adopt it now or do we adopt it in December?
Adopt it now.
Do I get it done with now? Yeah, so I'm thinking too. We got a busy December's gonna be busy. Although, so you had a chance to look. Hopefully, is there any other needs? We have the virtual option, so that allows us to participate if we're vacant or gone. I was like vacant. It's a bad word. Yes, sir.
Move to approve the calendar as amended.
All right. Is there a second? Motion's been made and seconded to approve the calendar as amended. Discussions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Calendar is adopted. Administrative update, number 10.
This will be expedited, but please jump in if you have any questions. So in the area of outreach, Tim attended the Washington Fire Commissioners Association Eye to Eye Expo in October and had an outreach table there to answer questions. Tammy and Jessica attended the Firefighters Cancer Survivors Network event. Tammy was asked to speak at the event and provide a presentation related to the role of the agency's ombudsman in assisting families. Earlier this interim, one of the issues that the board was looking at was the tax status of catastrophic disability benefits. there had been a decision by, or information provided to DRS by Ice Miller as DRS was implementing the PSERS catastrophic disability benefit that indicated that some of the benefit was taxable in certain circumstances, and that was new. We were asked, Jacob and I were asked to consult with Ice Miller to see if there was any way to resolve that without changing the benefit itself. Without increasing the benefit itself. And after consultation with Ice Miller, we can tell you their answer is no. So there would be no way to affect the tax status of the benefit without having a impact on the benefit itself. Something that would potentially create increases, for instance, in the amount that people would get paid. We will have the final presentation in December on the agency's annual financial audit. That'll be done by the state auditor's office. And the next meeting is December 13th here at 9:30. That concludes my administrative update.
Questions for Steve? All right. Under our public comment, I believe, Roy, I know you had sent something in. I didn't know if you wanted to say something. I do have a little note here. It says signed up to testify during public comment. So. Okay. I believe we have that coming up as well.
Yeah, that's on the agenda now for December after your action today.
Yep. Right. I know Pat said if we stayed past 1:30, he gets dinner, so I could stay a little bit longer. All right, it's been moved. Is there a second to adjourn? Moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, can stay and have. All right, we are adjourned. Seeing everybody in December 13th. Thank you.